Chen Luo, who was terminally ill, discovered after spending the last 3 months of his life that he was reincarnated on the day he was diagnosed with cancer. Overjoyed at first, Chen Luo soon realized that 3 months later, he still died of cancer. But what he never expected was that he would be reincarnated again on New Year's Day of 2019, the day of his diagnosis. Up until now, Chen Luo has been reincarnated for the 10,000th time. During these more than 2,000 years of endless cycles, Chen Luo has mastered every skill, every language, won countless Nobel Prizes, and taken on every profession in the world, becoming an omniscient and omnipotent being. Just as Chen Luo, in his agony, wanted to end this fate, time suddenly moved. Chapter 1: The Madman. This place should already be surrounded by the police. Even if you get the ransom, you won't be able to escape. In the top-floor restaurant of Pengcheng's most famous rose garden, Xia Luyun, sitting by the window, coldly stared at the man in the white suit in front of her. Chen Luo, wearing an amused smile, showed no sign of panic. Instead, he looked at Xia Luyun with great interest. "I've encountered countless women in my life, but Miss Xia is one of the most beautiful and charming, as well as one of the hardest to win over." Xia Luyun frowned, suddenly asking, "Are you going to die?" Chen Luo burst into laughter, clapping his hands. "Why do you think so? Although you swiftly took down my bodyguards, your physical strength quickly waned afterward. Your complexion is haggard, your face pale and bloodless. I've seen many chemotherapy patients, and your symptoms are identical to theirs. Moreover, when you realized this place was surrounded by the police, you didn't show a hint of panic. Instead, there was a trace of mockery in your eyes. This shows that you're not afraid of the police at all. If I'm not mistaken, terminal cancer?" Just half an hour ago, Chen Luo appeared at Xia Luyun's table with a black briefcase, then pulled out 2 guns and fired twice into the air. The entire restaurant descended into chaos, with all the guests and staff fleeing instantly. Only Xia Luyun's 4 bodyguards tried to resist, but after Chen Luo took down 2 of them with his bare hands and aimed his guns at the remaining 2, they quickly complied. Now, the 4 bodyguards in black suits were handcuffed together, and a beautiful girl in her early 20s, trembling with fear, was cowering behind Xia Luyun, her personal secretary, Xia Fan. Chen Luo laughed heartily, but the laughter soon turned into a violent cough. "Miss Xia, you're indeed renowned for both beauty and intelligence. So, here's the question: since I'm already dying, I naturally don't care whether I escape or not. Miss Xia, what will you do?" When Chen Luo confirmed that he was terminally ill, Xia Luyun couldn't help but frown. A man on the verge of death had very little to fear. "Then why do you need the ransom? To give it to your family? You should know that even if you get the ransom, you won't be able to give it to them." Xia Luyun quickly regained her composure, speaking calmly, "If you know who I am, you should understand that if I wanted to, it would be easy to deal with your family." A smirk appeared on Chen Luo's lips as he sighed, as expected of Miss Xia. "This is the first time I've seen a hostage threaten her captor. Aren't you afraid I'll take advantage of you first and then kill you?" Xia Luyun sneered coldly, "Can you even get it up?" Chen Luo couldn't hold back his laughter any longer, laughing so hard that he doubled over, tears streaming down his face. "Impressive, impressive. Miss Xia is truly one of the most interesting women I've ever met. How about this? If Miss Xia voluntarily kisses me, I'll let you go. How about that?" Xia Luyun was stunned for a moment before coldly replying, "Do you think I'm a child? I have many flaws, but one thing about me is that I always keep my word." Chen Luo grinned, "Miss Xia has nothing to lose, or are you afraid?" Xia Luyun snorted, clearly not believing a word Chen Luo said, and turned her head to look out the window. Chen Luo acted as if he suddenly understood something, smiling as he continued, "I almost forgot. Miss Xia has androphobia, can't stand being within a meter of a man, and can't tolerate being touched by one." Xia Luyun's expression changed abruptly. She quickly turned to him and asked coldly, "How do you know that?" Chen Luo smiled, "You told me, of course." Xia Luyun was once again taken aback. Her androphobia was a secret known only to herself, she hadn't even told her family. As for what Chen Luo said, she didn't believe him at all. She had never met this man, let alone told him such private things. How did this kidnapper know? She started to re-examine Chen Luo with a mixture of shock and suspicion. The man looked about 27 or 28, with an ordinary appearance, neither handsome nor ugly. But his aura was unforgettable, especially his eyes, which seemed to hold endless stories and wisdom far beyond his years, not at all like those of a young man. Nor did he seem like a ruthless criminal. "Impossible." Chen Luo chuckled and said calmly, "What's impossible?" I also know you have a crimson birthmark on your back and 2 scars on your ankle from when you were kidnapped the first time. Who exactly are you? Xia Liuyun's composure finally broke. These were intimate details of her body known only to her and her parents. There was no way an outsider could know. The scars from her first kidnapping were a taboo in Xia Liuyun's life. Her parents would never mention those old wounds to anyone, let alone reveal the birthmark on her back. Could her bathroom have been bugged? Chen Luo smiled slightly. Do you remember what I said earlier? Miss Xie is one of the hardest women to win over because androphobia is such a troublesome condition. But I have infinite time, so I made it one of my pleasures. It took me several years and countless opportunities to finally win you over. Let me think, that must have been over 100 years ago? Xia Luyun stood there for a long time, then suddenly let out a cold laugh, thinking that this man must be insane. She was only 29, and this man claimed to have won her over more than 100 years ago. Utter nonsense. Not only did Xia Luyun think this, but even her secretary Xia Fan and the bodyguards wore expressions of disbelief, convinced that this man must be mentally ill. But if he wasn't truly crazy, why would he dare to kidnap the daughter of the Xie family? Do you think I'm crazy? Chen Luo seemed to have guessed what Xia Luyun was thinking and continued with a smile. I'm actually on the verge of going mad. How about this? Since we have time, why don't I tell you a story? Xia Luyun sneered, but her eyes were filled with deep suspicion as the questions in her mind only grew. On New Year's Day of 2019, I was diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. The doctor told me I only had 3 months to live. We're the same age, just 29 years old. Receiving a death sentence at such a young age, do you know how that feels? Chapter 2, The 10,000th Rebirth. Chen Lu suddenly laughed to himself and continued, I felt like the sky was about to collapse, and I was in a daze, not even knowing how I left the hospital. Although I was not married and my girlfriend had just broken up with me, my parents were still alive. I was afraid to tell them the news, and I didn't even dare to go home, for fear that they would notice something was wrong. In the last 3 months of my life, I used up all my savings on chemotherapy, but the result was that I gave all the money to the hospital, and my health got worse and worse. I was also in constant fear of dying at any time. By the end of my life, I didn't even have the strength to walk anymore, so I had to tell my parents to take care of me and to see them for the last time. I still remember the moment my parents saw me and their expressions of collapse. I know they wished they could take my place, but they could only watch me die little by little. Until one day 3 months later, on April Fool's Day 2019, the heavens played a joke on me. Seeing that my parents were going to use up their lifelong savings and continue to spend money on this bottomless pit, I thought to myself that I was going to die anyway, and I couldn't burden them with my death, so on April 1st, 2019, I jumped off the roof of the hospital's inpatient department. Chen Luo's words caused a hint of derision to appear in Xia Liuyun's eyes, because today was April 1st, 2019. So you should be dead by now, why are you here? Or did the chemotherapy give you mental issues? Chen Luo laughed heartily. You see, this is the best part. After jumping from a building over 20 stories high, I was certainly as good as dead. But soon, I discovered something extremely shocking. I suddenly regained consciousness and returned to January 1st, 2019, the day I was diagnosed in the hospital. To be precise, I was reborn. After a short period of shock and disbelief, I finally accepted this fact. But the old man in the sky played a big joke on me. The date of my rebirth was exactly the same as the day I received the death notice, which means that I am still dead, except that I have 3 more months to live. Xia Luyun paused for a moment, and then suddenly couldn't help but burst out laughing. Reborn? I thought you were going to tell me some wonderful story, but it turns out it was just your imagination. Xia Fan and the bodyguards also had incredulous expressions, thinking that Chen Luo had probably just escaped from the mental hospital. They looked at him with extremely strange and worried eyes, because no one knew what a mental patient would do. Chen Luo didn't care at all about Xia Liuyun's sarcasm, and seemed to be lost in his own memories. He continued, during my first rebirth, I felt very excited, and I was very grateful to the heavens for giving me a second chance. This time, I didn't spend a single penny on medical treatment. I took all my savings and traveled all over the country with my parents, having a great time for 2 whole months, until I could no longer hide my illness. I didn't want to burden them, so after saying goodbye to my parents, I chose to commit suicide again. However, what I never expected was that I returned to January 1st, 2019. The second time, I was still very excited, thinking that this was an arrangement of fate, and that in this way I was prolonging my life in disguise. This time, I took my parents abroad for a vacation and spent all my savings again, but I still couldn't avoid the cancer claiming my life. My health condition became weaker and weaker as time went by, and I simply couldn't hide it anymore. I chose to commit suicide again, as if there was a force in the universe, and I returned to January 1st again. In this way, I kept being reborn. At first, I was very excited, but by the time I reached the 100th time, I started to think, why? In just 3 months, it was only a short time since I had become familiar with a stranger. I was unable to maintain an intimate relationship with other people because I would die after 3 months, and I would only cause trouble for others. What caused me the most pain was that I was unable to tell anyone about my special situation, because once I died, the whole world would return to January 1st again, and they would forget about me and start all over again. At this time, I found that I seemed to have been violently ripped out of this world and become an outcast. When it came to the 200th rebirth, I angrily roared at the world, I was wrong. Release me from this damned prison and let me die. When Chen Luo said this, Xia Luyun, Xia Fan, and the others all looked a little different. Because Chen Luo's tone and expression conveyed a sense of loneliness and vicissitudes of life that was extremely infectious, just by listening to him, they inexplicably felt their emotions affected, making them inexplicably feel that what Chen Luo said was true. But what Chen Luo said was really absurd, and no normal person would dare to believe it. At that time, I started to try every means to kill myself, jumping off buildings, hanging myself, lying on train tracks, drinking poison, jumping into the sea, crashing my car, going to the chaotic Middle East to get shot, becoming a human bomb, etc. If I count carefully, I should have experienced hundreds of ways to die. But what made me helpless was that no matter how I died, or if I died early before the 3 months were up, I would return to January 1st, 2019. And no matter what method I use, going to the best liver disease hospital in the world, or the method of freezing the body, etc., I cannot live past April 1st. I, like a curse, am forever trapped within these 90 days. By the time of the 300th rebirth, I finally accepted my fate. Chen Luo suddenly laughed at himself as he said this. Since this thief of a god is playing with me like this, then I will have to have some fun. In these 3 short months, although people will forget about me, the knowledge I have learned will not be forgotten. In this infinite loop of time, I have enough time and energy to learn everything I want to learn. Today is exactly my 10,000th rebirth, which is almost 2,000 years. I have learned all the languages and scripts in the world, and I have even taught myself the scripts and languages of the 4 ancient civilizations. I am proficient in all musical instruments, I have learned to appraise treasures, fight, drive, dance, perform, cook, and so on. To this day, I myself do not know how many skills I have. Using these skills, I have done every imaginable occupation, from tramp, assassin, biologist, doctor, lawyer, worker, celebrity, hacker. In my search for thrills, I even became a mercenary in the chaotic Middle East, a pirate in the Caribbean, and the president of the world's most valuable company. After I had done all the jobs I could think of, I spent hundreds of rebirths studying mathematics, physics, chemistry, medicine, etc., and won the Nobel Prize hundreds of times. After upgrading all the jobs I could think of to max, I found that I no longer had any pursuit, and I just wanted to find greater thrills to keep myself from going crazy. Chapter 3 Role-Playing. Xia Luyun stared at Chen Luo, analyzing his expression and tone of voice to determine whether he was a psychopath. However, the more Xia Luyun analyzed, the more confused she became, because she could not tell. Whether it was the tone of voice, expression, eyes or temperament, Xia Luyun could feel that what Chen Luo said was the truth, but what he said was just as unbelievable as a fairy tale. Xia Luyun quickly came to a conclusion in her heart: the man in front of her was either self-hypnotized, making him believe in such an absurd thing with absolute certainty, or he was a master of acting at the level of a movie star, with a flawless disguise. But at this time, what Xia Luyun cared about most was not this. She wanted to know what Chen Luo really wanted to do. The Xie family was not an ordinary family. As a family that had risen locally in Guangdong province, its influence spread all the way south of the Yangtze River. The market value of its subsidiary Yaoshi Real Estate alone is nearly 50 billion yuan, ranking among the top 4 of all listed real estate companies in the country. Xia Luyun herself owns shares in Yaoshi Real Estate worth more than 10 billion yuan, making her one of the richest women in the country. Even on a global scale, it is rare to find someone her age with such a large fortune. Xia Luyun did not rely on her family background to obtain so much wealth. In the Xie family, everything must be earned through one's own efforts. You must prove your worth before you can receive wealth and status commensurate with it. Xia Luyun has a double degree in law from Oxford and an MBA from Harvard. After joining Yaoshi Real Estate, she also started from the bottom and worked her way up to become the executive director of Yaoshi Real Estate, all through her own talent. Moreover, the direct descendants of the Xie family all undergo professional training, and this training is not about business management skills or anything like that, but rather measures to take in the event of a kidnapping, just in case. Especially for someone like Xie Luyun, who had already experienced a kidnapping at the age of 18. The first step in the knowledge Xie Luyun learned was to figure out the kidnapper's demands. No matter what conditions the other party proposed, they should promise as much as possible to ensure their personal safety, while trying to find out as much information as possible about the other party.
So, the reason you kidnapped me was to seek excitement? Xie Luyun's eyes twitched slightly, and he suddenly asked.
Chen Luo smiled and shook his head repeatedly, saying, No, kidnapping you is not at all exciting. In the past, I had to constantly reincarnate, and I had to set goals for myself in order to prevent myself from going crazy.
Well, to be precise, it should be role-playing.
For example, starting from the 1000th reincarnation, I played the role of a playboy, and completely relied on my charm to sleep with 1000 superb women. Oh, to explain, I define an exceptional woman as a woman like Miss Xie, who is perfect in terms of appearance, personality, figure, temperament, and family background. Chen Luo looked at Xie Luyun with a smile, his eyes full of admiration. Xie Luyun looked indifferent, and Chen Luo's eyes at this time did not carry the slightest trace of lust, completely like admiring some kind of work of art. Xie Luyun naturally knew how lethal her appearance was, because the way those men usually looked at her was enough to say it all. Xie Luyun has long since learned to ignore those men, but for some reason, Chen Luo's gaze made her feel very uncomfortable for no reason.
Then I'm curious, since you know that I have a phobia of men, how did you manage to get me?
Xie Luyun snorted, her face full of disdain and provocation. Chen Lu laughed out loud, so I said Miss Xie is the most difficult woman to approach and also the most interesting. In fact, it's quite simple. I have a doctorate in psychology from a world-renowned university and have done some research on the subject of fear of men. It's also quite simple to break through this, which is to constantly create opportunities for you to come into contact with men alone, so that you gradually accept me getting close to you.
Xie Luyun's face sneered again, for example?
Chen Luo continued with a smile. For example, I first kidnapped your parents and best friend Tang Xinran, as well as your little secretary Xiaofan, and forced them to tell me about your preferences through various hypnosis and torture techniques I have learned.
Anyway, it will be reset soon, and they won't remember anything.
Xie Luyun and Xiaofan's expressions changed at the same time. Chen Luo called out Xie Luyun's best friend and Xiaofan's name as soon as he opened his mouth. Whether what he said was true or crazy, it was obvious that he had put in a lot of effort. After learning what I wanted, I applied for the position in the president's office of Yaoshi Group. Although you required a female, with my experience and ability, I was still recommended to your office and became the only male in the president's office. The next thing was very simple. You worked overtime until the early morning, and I followed you to work until the early morning, creating opportunities to be alone through manual means. For example, when we were in the elevator, I used hacking techniques to hack the elevator of the building and stop it, so that we were alone in the elevator all night. I remember it was winter, and the elevator was cold and dark. I took off my clothes and gave them to you to wear, and I was so cold that I was admitted to the hospital, and that was the first time I touched your heart. You like art, and you have a certain level of appreciation for music and painting. From time to time, I showed off my extraordinary abilities in these areas in front of you, which naturally attracted your attention. This, combined with my outstanding work ability, repeatedly provided you with various solutions that could increase the profits of Yaoshi real estate, and these were proven.
So in less than a month, you promoted me to the position of assistant to the president, and I became your first male assistant. In the second month, I became the first man to have free access to your home.
While I was in your home, I did a lot of things to make sure that things would break or stop working from time to time. In the first few months, you got used to the idea that I would take care of everything.
So once something stopped working, your first reaction was to call me.
When I often appeared at your house in the middle of the night, I would touch your body on purpose or by accident. You resisted at first, but gradually got used to it. By the third month, when I finally kissed you, you no longer resisted at all, but instead completely relaxed.
When Chen Luo said this, there was dead silence in the entire restaurant.
Because he was so detailed, it was almost not like he was making it up. Xiaofan and a few bodyguards looked at Chen Luo in disbelief, unable to speak for a while, not knowing how to describe their feelings.
Xie Luyun, in particular, was stunned for a long time, wondering if she would be moved if a man really did what Chen Luo said, and even overcome her fear of men?
Chapter 4, A Promise. After a long while, Xie Luyun came to a conclusion: if a man went to such lengths to get close to her, and after all the calculations, she might really fall for him. However, Xia Luyun soon felt that her emotions seemed to be a bit off, as if she had inexplicably believed Chen Luo's words. You have to understand that what he said was based on the premise that he had really been reborn 10,000 times. But can a person really be reborn 10,000 times? Xia Luyun had never met anyone like him before, and now he could not believe it either. It sounded so real. Chen Lu laughed. When you were 18 years old and in your third year of high school, you were courted by your classmate Li Zixuan. After being repeatedly rejected in a humiliating manner, he was so angry that he had you kidnapped. After being kidnapped, you still threatened Li Zixuan, saying that the Xie family would destroy the Li family, which further angered Li Zixuan. He stripped you naked on the spot and tried to rape you. Fortunately, at this time, your bodyguard found something unusual and arrived in time to save you. It was also at that time that you developed a strong aversion to men, and even your father could not touch you. As Chen Luo spoke, the people present once again fell silent and involuntarily focused their attention on Xia Luyun. Impossible. How do you know about this? Xia Luyun's face turned white for a moment. Apart from her, the only other people who knew about this were Li Zixuan and the thugs who kidnapped her. Afterwards, Xia Yuan, the patriarch of the Xie family, was furious and carried out a very tragic revenge on the Li family. Not only was the Li family completely destroyed, but although Li Zixuan was still alive, he was physically castrated by the Xie family. He could no longer stay in the country and was forced to flee abroad. The Li family still had some power in Pengcheng at the time, but they ended up like this, not to mention the local thugs and rascals, who all met with accidental deaths within less than a month. The outside world only knew that Li Zixuan had kidnapped Xia Luyun, which led to the Xie family's retaliation. No one knew the details. Apart from the Xie family patriarch and Xia Luyun's parents, and the bodyguard who saved her, no one else knew. Xia Fan and the bodyguards noticed Xia Luyun's expression and words, and knew that this was the truth. However, they all secretly lamented in their hearts, knowing that this secret was a curse for them, not a blessing. As I said earlier, I grabbed your parents during my rebirth, and used hypnosis to find out these things. I know a lot, so much that I don't even want to remember. Chen Lu smiled faintly and continued, for example, your favorite piece of music is a piano piece called Upspoken, your favorite dish is the caviar tofu on the table right now, and your favorite. That's enough. Xia Luyun suddenly interrupted Chen Lu, her eyes full of shame and anger. What Chen Lu was saying now made her feel humiliated, as if she had been stripped naked and exposed to everyone's view. What do you really want? Xia Luyun coldly looked at Chen Luo and said, what you want is definitely not money. Chen Luo patted his hands and laughed heartily, you are indeed Miss Xia, you immediately grasped the crux of the issue. I do not lack money, regardless of anything else, just with the lottery winning information in my head, I can make countless amounts of money. And I have enjoyed everything I should have, money is just meaningless numbers to me. The reason I kidnapped you was to fulfill a promise. What promise? Xia Luyun frowned, her gaze fixed on Chen Luo. She had to admit that this man exuded a unique charm that was impossible to penetrate. Chen Luo sighed slightly, that was a different story. But please allow me to do something else before I tell this story. Chen Luo looked at his watch and sighed. There was about a minute left. Xia Luyun and the others all had a puzzled expression on their faces, not knowing what Chen Luo meant. My name is Zhuang Liming, I'm a police negotiator, and I'm here to hear your demands. Chen Lu suddenly spoke without warning. Xia Liyun and the others were taken aback, and even more confused. But at this moment, the elevator door to the top-floor restaurant suddenly opened with a ding, and a middle-aged man in a gray suit and glasses walked in with his hands up. My name is Zhuang Liming, I'm a police negotiator, and I'm here to hear your demands. Xia Luyun and the others immediately looked terrified, as if they had seen a ghost, and looked at Chen Luo. If Chen Luo had predicted that the negotiator would come up in a minute, it would have been fine, but he even knew the other person's name and what he was going to say, which was creepy. Zhuang Liming let out a long breath when he saw that Xia Luyun was safe and sound. Hello, can I come closer? I'm too far away here, I have to speak very loudly. Before Zhuang Liming could say anything, Chen Luo looked at Xia Luyun and the others and said this with a smile. Then Xia Luyun and the others, for some reason, inexplicably looked at Zhuang Liming, who was standing by the elevator. The next moment, sure enough, Zhuang Liming raised his hand and cautiously walked over towards them, then said, Hello, can I come closer? Xia Luyun's expression changed drastically. If the first sentence could be taken as the words of a negotiation expert, it was not difficult to deduce what the other party was going to say. Even the identity of the negotiation expert could be investigated in advance. But this second sentence was clearly outside the scope of what could be deduced. Xie Luyun then thought about what Chen Luo had just said, and an extremely absurd feeling could not help but arise in her heart. Has this guy really been reborn 10,000 times? Just stay there, don't move, or I can't guarantee what will happen. Chen Luo didn't even look at Zhuang Liming, leaned over, picked up a long black box on the ground, placed it on the table, and then opened it in front of Xie Luyun and the others. When Xie Luyun saw what was inside the box, her expression couldn't help but change again. Inside the long black box was a laptop computer, and under the laptop computer was a sniper rifle. Chen Luo put the laptop aside first, then took out the sniper rifle and started assembling it as if no one was around. Chen Luo's hand speed was very fast. In just less than a minute, he assembled the sniper rifle and set it up on the dining table. Chapter 5, Night God. Xie Luyun didn't know what kind of sniper rifle it was, but from Chen Luo's skilled movements, it was obvious that he had practiced for a long time to be able to do that. She couldn't understand it, but Zhuang Liming behind her suddenly looked a little shocked. As a police negotiator, he naturally recognized firearms. The rifle Chen Lu had assembled in his hands was clearly an L115A3 sniper rifle, a super sniper rifle produced by the military of Eagle Country. It sold for about $50,000 on the market, but this kind of military weapon from another country was simply not available to normal people. It could only be purchased on the black market, and the price would more than double at times. In other words, this rifle must have cost at least $100,000, nearly 700,000 renminbi. This rifle was expensive, but it was worth every penny. It had excellent performance and was truly good value for money. It performed very well on the battlefield in Afghanistan, and it has made great contributions to the Eagle Army. It has also set the world record for long-range sniping at 2,500 meters, and is known as the world's longest range and most accurate sniper rifle. Miss Xie is so smart, so why don't you guess why I have been standing here the whole time, even though I am obviously so weak, and have not sat down? Chen Luo said while smiling, leaning down and beginning to calibrate the scope against the window. Xie Luyun's expression changed slightly. She looked at Chen Lu first, then surveyed her surroundings, and it seemed she understood something. There's a sniper outside? Chen Lu couldn't help but burst out laughing again, and while laughing, he coughed again. Only this time, the coughing was particularly intense, as blood began to overflow from the corners of his mouth. Miss Xie Luyun's insight is indeed keen. Chen Lu casually reached out to wipe the blood from the corners of his mouth, and laughed again, his face full of radiance. This place is shielded by walls on 3 sides, so the sniper can't shoot. Although the line of sight directly in front is not obstructed, they dare not shoot because there is this Miss Xiafan in front of them and you as a human shield. As soon as this negotiation expert came up the stairs, the sniper started targeting me. As long as I leave this position by more than 1 meter, I will be killed. Xie Luyun looked at Chen Luo and suddenly asked, "This isn't the first time you've kidnapped me, is it?" Chen Luo was not at all surprised that Xie Luyun could guess. He smiled and shrugged his shoulders, saying, "You see, this is the advantage of being able to regenerate infinitely. I can keep trying and making mistakes, and know where I went wrong, which leads to my failure, so that I won't make the same mistake twice." As Chen Luo said, he suddenly leaned in front of the sniper rifle, then aimed and pulled the trigger. Chen Luo's movements were astonishingly fast, and the whole process was done in one go, taking just a few seconds. Bang! A crisp gunshot came. Chen Luo's body trembled slightly, and the recoil from the sniper rifle sent his entire body several steps back before he regained his balance. Immediately afterwards, a second crisp sound was heard, and a clear bullet hole appeared in the restaurant's tempered glass. Xie Luyun and the others were fine, because they didn't know anything about firearms, but Zhuang Liming's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Because of the relatively large caliber of these super sniper rifles, the recoil is extremely terrifying. They generally need to be fixed to the ground with a tripod and screws to maintain stability when firing, otherwise the recoil can break a person's shoulder. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the earpiece in Zhuang Liming's ear. "Liming, please be careful. Our sniper's rifle has been destroyed by the opponent, and now the sniper dares not show his head and has retreated." Zhuang Liming gasped. It was the middle of the night, and Chen Luo was still in the bright restaurant, and yet he had managed to hit the sniper rifle in the dark. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed that such a thing was possible. Moreover, judging from Chen Luo's actions, it seemed that he had anticipated the presence of a sniper and had even prepared a sniper rifle in advance. Chen Luo swayed a little, then slowly walked over to the seat opposite Xie Luyun and sat down, smiling and saying, "At last I can catch my breath." He took his time, picked up the teapot on the table and poured himself a cup of water. After taking a sip, he continued, "So, now for the second story. As I mentioned before, I had to set myself various goals and start playing different roles in order to keep myself from going crazy. This time, I gave myself the identity of an urban Robin Hood. Well, it's also called a modern-day Robin Hood, protecting those who are oppressed by society and authoritarianism and who don't get fair treatment." When Chen Luo got to this point, he saw Xie Liuyun's expression of speechless, and he couldn't help but laugh again. Does he think it's quite nonsensical? In fact, I don't want to find such a lofty reason either. But after living for more than 2,000 years, I have found that the only way to feel at peace is to give myself such a lofty reason. As for the means to achieve the goal, it doesn't matter. Chen Lu was talking there, and Zhuang Liming, who was behind him, was very embarrassed. Chen Lu had ignored him from beginning to end, and Zhuang Liming was standing there, at a loss. "Liming, we have already found out the identity of the kidnapper." Zhuang Liming froze for a moment, but didn't say anything, because he knew that there would definitely be more to come from the earpiece. He is the wanted criminal agony, wanted in more than 70 countries around the world. Zhuang Liming's heart shook violently, and he looked at Chen Lu in disbelief. Because this Yeshen was no ordinary person, but a world-famous wanted criminal. 3 months ago, Yeshen had infiltrated the Louvre and stolen the world-famous Mona Lisa without anyone noticing. What's more, after stealing the original painting, he had replaced it with a copy, which went unnoticed for a whole week. When the Louvre staff removed the fake painting, they were shocked to discover that it was almost indistinguishable from the real thing. It was also at that time that they discovered the Chinese signature of the god of darkness on the back of the painting. Immediately afterwards, this world-famous painting was sold on the black market for a staggering price of $1 billion. The French government, together with Interpol, set up a dragnet to catch the god of darkness, but they failed. After that, internationally renowned charitable organizations received huge donations in US dollars, and the note left in the donation was the Chinese characters for God of the Night, and the funds added up to exactly $1 billion. Then there was something even more shocking. Over the next 2 months, the world's richest people on the rich list were robbed one after the other. Bill Gates' original Leonardo da Vinci hammer manuscript, purchased more than 10 years ago and worth more than $100 million, disappeared from his home, and the name God of the Night was also left at the scene. After these incidents, the name of the night god shook the world. The wealthy victims banded together and offered a huge reward of $500 million for his capture. However, this did not stop him. The things the night god did were more and more unbelievable. Just 10 days ago, he broke into the U.S. presidential residence and stole the portrait of Abraham Lincoln inside. He even wrote the words "The God of the Night World has been here" on the forehead of the U.S. president, but no one noticed. Chapter 6, Global Broadcast. Zhuang Liming knew that Chen Luo in front of him was the night god, but he was so shocked that he couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. He couldn't understand why Chen Luo had taken Xie Liuyun hostage. According to Chen Luo's previous actions, every time he made a move, it was on a world-famous treasure, and every time he made a move, it was as if a gazelle had hung its horns, leaving no trace to be found, so that no one outside could guess how he did it. This was Chen Luo's first time taking a hostage, which made Zhuang Liming even more puzzled, because the other party would not lack money, and although the Xie family was well connected in Guangdong province, there was still a certain gap compared to those globally renowned families and wealthy people. With Chen Luo's extraordinary theft skills, even if the Xie family had any treasures, it should not be difficult for him. What was the point? While Zhuang Liming was at a loss for an answer, Chen Luo spoke up, not only telling him the reason, but also many others. At this time, Chen Luo slowly took the previous notebook and started to operate it with his fingers. Xie Liuyun and the others on the other side saw Chen Luo's fingers dancing on the keyboard of the notebook as if they were going to fly, so fast that it was a bit blurry. At the same time, on major video and live streaming platforms around the world, the screen suddenly cut to Chen Luo's face. Whether on a computer or a mobile phone, anyone watching a video or live stream on a screen at that moment was shocked to see a man in a white suit appear on their screen. Chen Luo smiled and waved at the camera, welcoming everyone to watch his first and last live stream. This show will be very exciting, and you should all enjoy it. At this moment, more than 100 million people around the world were watching the video and live broadcast at the same time. Seeing this scene, they all thought there was an issue with their equipment. Foreign viewers in particular, who couldn't understand Mandarin at all, were naturally confused. Most of their first reaction was to turn off their equipment and then try to log in again. But to everyone's surprise, whether they exited the platform or restarted their equipment, when they logged in again, it was still Chen Lu's oriental face. It didn't take long for most people to find out that it seemed like all the major video and live streaming platforms around the world had been hijacked at the same time. This time, both foreigners and Chinese people's jaws dropped. This meant that hackers had hacked all video and live streaming platforms at the same time, forcibly redirecting the screen. Oh, my God. What the hell happened? Hacking all video and live streaming websites at the same time is something that only a hacker group could do. Oh my God, how did they do it? This person looks a little familiar, doesn't he? I remember now, this man looks like the internationally wanted Yezhin. It really is him. The man who was offered a reward of $500 million. The audience had not yet recovered from the other party's terrifying hacking prowess when someone recognized Chen Luo's identity with shock, and then they all stared wide-eyed at the screen. They lost interest in the previous videos and broadcasts in an instant, and they were now extremely curious to know what Chen Luo wanted to do. If Chen Luo wanted to, he could even hack into major television stations around the world. But that would be too difficult, and it would be hard to do with just the laptop in his hands, and it would also take a lot of time. The audience was enough for Chen Luo for now, so after saying hello, he turned his gaze to Zhuang Liming. Mr. Zhuang, if the internet here goes down, people could die. Zhuang Liming's expression suddenly changed because he had just received a notification from the command center about the hacking of those platforms. Although they did not know what Chen Luo wanted to do, they understood that this matter had already become a big deal and had evolved into an international incident. If not handled properly, not only the people in charge of the rescue, but also the bigwigs in the city would suffer greatly. Therefore, the command center had just officially informed him that they were preparing to use a jammer to block the signal here and cut off the internet connection. However, Zhuang Liming had just received the notification, and the other party directly threatened him, even in the middle of the live broadcast. If they really cut off the network, and Chen Luo killed someone, who would take the blame afterwards? A chill ran through Zhuang Liming's heart. Chen Luo seemed to have anticipated all their actions and had also prepared countermeasures, which made him feel extremely difficult. This was the first time since he had become a negotiation expert that he had felt deeply powerless. He was now like an idiot, completely at a loss as to what to do. After Chen Luo had finished warning Zhuang Liming, his gaze returned to Xia Liuyun's, and he smiled, saying, "The second story is not finished yet, let's continue." Xia Liuyun's expression was full of doubt and uncertainty. For one thing, she had been swayed a little in her mind and began to believe what Chen Luo had said. For another, she also couldn't figure out what Chen Luo really wanted to do. She had naturally heard everything he had just said, and she simply didn't expect that this man would go live streaming at such a time. What was he thinking? Chen Luo didn't care about the confused expressions on everyone's faces, and just continued with a faint smile, saying, 10 days ago, I just returned from the United States. Because I was wanted by many countries, I couldn't enter the country normally, so I had to contact a smuggler to sneak me in. Unfortunately, the smuggling boat was discovered by the police just as it was about to dock, so I had to jump into the sea early and swim back to Pengchang. When I finally reached shore, I had lost everything and didn't have a penny on me. Plus, I had been trapped in the cargo hold for a long time, so I basically looked like a beggar when I got ashore. But that wasn't a big deal for me, it just meant I had to spend a little more time. The first thing I did when I got ashore was to find someone to lend me some money. Well, I was asking strangers on the street for money. The exact words were, "Lend me 1,000 yuan in cash, and I'll grant you a wish." Not only did Xia Luyun and the others have shocked expressions on their faces, but everyone watching the live broadcast who could understand Mandarin almost couldn't stop laughing at this point. If he could borrow money from a stranger on the street in this way, it would really be a miracle. Chen Luo noticed their expressions and laughed, "Don't look at me like that. After living for so many years, I have to do something strange. But it's more or less what you'd expect. Everyone treated me like a crazy beggar, and some of them didn't even wait for me to say anything before they looked at me with contempt and hid themselves. But there was one exception. Chapter 7, a shop opened for just one person. When Chen Luo said this, Xia Luyun and the others all had surprised expressions on their faces. Chen Luo's words clearly implied that someone had actually lent him money. Chen Luo continued with a smile, saying that it was an elderly man in his 60s. When he heard the word unreasonable that I said, he did not laugh or show an expression of disgust, but just said that I did not look like a beggar and asked if I was in trouble. When Chen Luo said this, there was also a strange smile on his face. He said that in fact, even I was very surprised at the time, because I knew that although I did not look like a beggar, I was behaving like a lunatic, and the chances of that being successful were minimal. But I didn't care, because I was really bored and had endless time, and I didn't care about wasting time and energy doing meaningless things. The old man was called Han Jiwei, and he opened a noodle restaurant called Jiwei Xian on the side of the road. At that time, I happened to enter his shop.
This name should not be unfamiliar to Miss Xie?
When she heard the name Han Jiwei, Xia Liuyun's face suddenly changed, obviously being hit by Chen Luo.
Chen Luo smiled faintly.
Mr. Han didn't say whether he would lend me the money or not, but instead asked me if I was hungry first. I was exhausted at the time, and indeed I was both tired and hungry. I didn't mince my words, and simply said that I was hungry.
Mr. Han went to the kitchen and brought me a bowl of noodles. When I tasted the noodles, I immediately exclaimed in amazement.
Over the course of more than 2,000 years, I have tasted all kinds of delicious food in the world, and I am also a master chef myself, extremely picky about taste. But the bowl of noodles made by Mr. Han was still one of the best foods I had ever tasted. I was extremely surprised, because if the noodles were so delicious, then how could Jiwei Xian not have a single customer? After I had savored the noodles, I called out the main ingredients and seasonings used in the noodles on the spot, except that there were still some key things that I couldn't figure out for the time being. Mr. Han was also shocked, and immediately asked me if my surname was Xie. When he learned that I was not surnamed Xie and had no relation to the Xie family, Mr. Han also relaxed. While eating, I chatted with Mr. Han, and then the two of us were amazed again. We talked about everything from astronomy and geography to business and technology, and Mr. Han knew about almost everything. If it had been me, I would not have been surprised at all, but Mr. Han, the owner of a noodle shop, was so knowledgeable that it surprised me a little. When I pressed Mr. Han about what he used to do, he just told his son, who was helping out in the shop, to go to the nearby ATM and withdraw 1,000 yuan, and told me to leave quickly. I saw that Mr. Han didn't want to answer, so I didn't insist. After getting the 1,000 yuan, I asked Mr. Han if he had any wishes that I could fulfill for him. Mr. Han laughed and said that he was almost in his coffin, so where would he find any unfulfilled wishes? I knew that Mr. Han took what I said as a joke, but he just kept insisting. Seeing that I was so stubborn, and perhaps anxious to get rid of me, Mr. Han said casually that my wish was to rid the Han family of this fate. Chen Luo paused suddenly when he got to this point, looked at Xie Luyun, and said with a smile, "Miss Xie, you should be able to guess why I'm holding you hostage by now, right?" Xie Luyun looked a little uncomfortable. As Chen Luo had said, she did guess the reason. She just didn't expect that Chen Luo would go to such lengths just to fulfill a promise he made casually. Xie Luyun didn't know how to respond for a moment. After a moment of silence, she said, "If I can solve that matter, will you let us go?" Chen Luo laughed, "No, no, no. If I just want to solve this matter, I have at least dozens of ways to do it, and I don't need to waste so much effort. And most importantly, after today, my world will be reset, so I want to choose the most sensational method." Okay, now none of these viewers know what we're talking about, so please bear with me while I continue the story. At this moment, Yishan hijacked Xie Luyun in Pengcheng and started a live broadcast. It spread quickly around the world like a nuclear bomb going off. This also caused the number of people watching the live broadcast to increase exponentially at the same time around the world. Although many foreigners couldn't understand it, TV stations started broadcasting it at this time. Unlike ordinary video and live streaming platforms, most TV stations have translations, and some even have simultaneous translations. With these TV stations broadcasting, at least 1 billion people around the world were watching the live broadcast at the same time. In fact, as Chen Luo said, all the viewers were in a daze, not knowing the real reason for Chen Luo's kidnapping of Xie Luyun, and were waiting for his next move. After I left Jiwei Xian, I deliberately waited outside the door for a while, and then I saw a Bentley with the license plate 88888 parked in front of the door. Then an elderly man, looking to be about 60 years old, wearing a plain Zhongshan suit, entered Jiwei Xian. I recognized that person at first glance, because over the past 2,000 years, I have met everyone of some importance in Pengcheng. That person was Xie Yuan, the head of the Xie family, and the grandfather of Miss Xie. Mr. Han and his son greeted Xie Yuan at the door, acting respectfully like servants. Chen Luo sighed slightly. Xie Yuan had not been in the noodle shop for long before Mr. Han brought a bowl of noodles to him. He began to eat the noodles with a slow and concentrated manner, as if he was unaware of the outside world, and his eyes were focused only on the bowl of noodles. When he finished eating, he did not say goodbye, but simply left Jiwei Xian and got into his car and left. Then Mr. Han closed the door and went home with his son. When I saw this, I was first a little surprised, but in a very short time I judged that it seemed as if Jiwei Xian was only open for Xie Yuan. It only opened for a short time every day, and closed as soon as he had made that bowl of noodles for him. Jiwei Xian is in a very good location, in the middle of the business district, and if it were rented out, the the rent would not be less than 50,000 yuan per month. Of course, this amount of money is nothing to the Xie family, and it is not a big deal. If Xie Yuan is willing to pay such a high price to make Mr. Han his exclusive chef, it's fine. After all, it's a mutually beneficial arrangement, so there's nothing strange about it. But after spending a few days investigating the cause and development of the whole thing, I can't help but sincerely admire the Xie family's domineering and lawless ways.
Chapter 8, Descendants and Descendants, Endless Wealth.
Jiwei Xian opened when Pengchang became a special economic zone, and it has a history of almost 40 years. The original owner was Mr. Han's father, so Mr. Han's father simply used his name to name the restaurant. Not long after it opened, Jiwei Xian became famous for its unique taste, and many people queued up for the whole morning just to get a bowl of noodles from Jiwei Xian. It was also at that time that Xie Yuan, who had just turned 30 that year, noticed the noodle restaurant called Jiwei Xian. After eating his first bowl of noodles, he offered Mr. Han's father a salary that he could not refuse, and bought the property rights to the noodle shop from the landlord and gave it to the Han family. From then on, Jiwei Xian only made noodles for him, and he was the only person in the world who could taste that delicious food. Mr. Han's father worked for 20 years, and was already in his 60s. He was old and frail, and suffering from pancreatic cancer. His skills had greatly diminished, and the noodles he made had begun to lose their standard. So Mr. Han wanted to find an apprentice to inherit the craft. But the secret recipe for the noodles was passed down in the Han family, and Mr. Han's father only had one son and didn't want to pass it on to outsiders. When Mr. Han was 20 years old, he was admitted to Yale University, where he struggled for 20 years and successfully immigrated to the United States, becoming the CFO of a publicly traded company in Silicon Valley. With Mr. Han's wealth at that time, of course he had no intention of inheriting his father's humble family business. But Xie Yuan used some tricks, and in the end he came back and learned this. Trade. When Chen Luo said this, not only did the restaurant become quiet, but even the audience watching the live broadcast couldn't help but gasp. CFO is the chief financial officer, one of the executives of a public company, second only to the CEO in status. Han Jiwei is still the CFO of a public company in Silicon Valley. There are even fewer than one handful of Chinese people who have worked their way to this position in the United States, not to mention Han Jiwei more than 20 years ago. Although Chen Luo didn't say what methods Xie Yuan used to make Han Jiwei give up his position as CFO, anyone with a brain knows that it wasn't normal methods. This also shows how terrifying Xie Yuan is. For the sake of his own selfish desires, he can ruin a person's future and force the other person to come back and be his personal full-time chef. At the same time, domestic audiences began frantically searching for any news about the Xie family, and in a short moment, they shot to the top of the search list. Who is Xie Yuan? Guangdong Province Xie family. Jiwei Xian. In the blink of an eye, these keywords successfully dominated the top 3 trending searches. However, to everyone's surprise, the Xie family is extremely low-key. Even though there is the listed real estate company Yaoshi Real Estate, it is still unclear which members of the family own which industries. Members of the Xie family, whether they are direct or collateral relatives, rarely appear in media reports. Even for a nationally renowned beauty like Xie Luyun, the president of the company, the only information available about her is her age, education, and work experience at Yaoshi Real Estate. In this modern society with such advanced information technology, this is basically impossible, but the Xie family has managed to do it. But the more so, the more people can feel the fear of the Xie family. Such a silent and hidden giant in the shadows poses a far greater threat than those overt families. Chen Luo suddenly burst out laughing as he said this. Do you think this is the end? Do you remember what I just said, that Mr. Han and his son were both inside the noodle shop? Mr. Han's son was born in the United States and received a Western-style education since childhood, so he could not accept the Han family's situation even more. He once tried to rebel and leave the country, but in the end he returned to the Jiwei Xian noodle shop and began to learn the ancestral craft from Mr. Han. If nothing goes wrong, Mr. Han's grandson will also inherit the noodle shop and continue to run Jiwei Xian, just for Xie Yuan, or perhaps the next generation of the Xie family will make the noodles. There is a saying in Yugo Nishan that perfectly describes the situation of Mr. Han's family. Generations upon generations, endless supply. As long as the Xie family has a strength that is unattainable to ordinary people, the Han family will never escape the fate of becoming the Xie family's full-time chef. When Chen Luo said this, the air in the restaurant seemed to have been frozen, and it was extremely quiet. Apart from Xie Luyun, Zhuang Liming and Xia Fan, who worked for the Xie family, this was the first time they had heard of such a thing. These people all felt a chill rising from the soles of their feet, giving them a chilling feeling. Xie Yuan not only got 3 generations of his ancestors to work for him as cooks, he didn't even plan to let the descendants of the other side off the hook. Xia Fan and the others have also been in the Xie family for quite some time, and they have always heard various legends about Xie Yuan and know the fear of the helmsman of the Xie family, but when they heard this, their hearts still gave a little thump. The audience in the live broadcast room was even more blown up instantly. It was already 2019, and there were still people bullying others to this extent. The arrogance and domineering nature of the Xie family had reached a heinous level, instantly provoking the anger of countless people. It was now clear that as long as Xie Yuan was alive, and even if the Xie family was still around, the Han Jiwei family would probably not be able to escape this fate. For a time, all the companies associated with the Xie family were searched out. For example, the official website of Yaoshi Real Estate Group was attacked by a large number of netizens in a short period of time, causing the official website to directly collapse and become inaccessible. In addition, those who had originally planned to purchase commodity housing developed by Yaoshi Real Estate, or those who had signed a contract but had not yet made a payment, all contacted their account managers at this moment to cancel. Some even organized indignant netizens to leave messages under the official Weibo account of the police, demanding a thorough investigation of the Xie family. At this point, everyone knew that the Xie family was finished. If such things were exposed online, they could be suppressed with the use of some connections. But Chen Luo was broadcasting live to the world, and he was also holding Xie Luyun and the others hostage, making it impossible for anyone to cut off the broadcast. At this point, it no longer mattered whether Xie Yuan had done this or not. Xie Luyun's face turned pale. She could already foresee what would happen tomorrow. She was afraid that once trading opened, the stock price of Yaoshi Real Estate would immediately plummet, and no one could save it. Xie Luyun had never thought that the powerful Xie family could be so vulnerable. She knew that even if her grandfather Xie Yuan were here at this moment, there was no way he could solve this problem. Because the man in front of her was risking his life to do this, while the Xie family would never risk their lives, the two sides were in an unequal position from the start. Chapter 9: The Killer. In a manor in Pengcheng. This is a seaside manor consisting of more than 10 luxury villas by the sea, covering several hectares. There is a helipad outside, and there is even a golf course, which is extremely luxurious. However, from one of the villas in the main residence, there came a furious roar, followed by the sound of things being smashed. The bodyguards and housekeepers in the villa were all silenced and instinctively moved away from the villa. At this moment, Xie Yuan was frantically smashing things in the living room, whether it was porcelain or jade on the table, none of it was spared, and they were all smashed to pieces. Although he is 70 years old, he has been pampered for a long time and is in very good condition, looking no more than in his 50s. However, he is currently furious as he shatters things while furiously yelling, "Han Jiwei! You ungrateful bastard! I'll show you what it means to be worse off than death." In the living room, in addition to Xie Yuan, there are also his 4 sons and other core members of the Xie family, including Xie Liuyun's father Xie Yixian. Although these people had different expressions, they all shared one thing in common: deep worry and panic. After what had happened, everyone present knew that the Xie family was in trouble and might even collapse. Especially when they saw Xie Yuan lose his temper like that, their foreboding grew stronger. No one present had ever seen Xie Yuan so furious before. As the helmsman of the Xie family, Xie Yuan has been the anchor of the Xie family for many years. No matter what kind of stormy waves he encounters, Xie Yuan can calmly handle them, as if there is nothing he cannot solve. At this time, Xie Yuan's loss of control also spread panic to everyone's hearts. Xie Yuan stared at Chen Luo's face on the screen, and it took a long time for him to calm down. He said in a sinister voice, "This Yixin, has anyone in the Xie family offended him?" "Dad, we've checked, this Yixin is called Chen Luo. Although he has been in Pengcheng, he has no connection with our Xie family." Xie Yixian glanced at Xie Yuan carefully before speaking. "Isn't this your precious daughter?" Xie Yuan's gaze suddenly turned cold. Xie Yixian's heart skipped a beat. The Xie family had arranged many marriage meetings for Xie Luyun with people from similar backgrounds, but she had rejected them all, and the way she had rejected them was cold and merciless, making her offend many people. Not just Xie Yuan, but the entire Xie family had a lot of negative things to say about Xie Luyun. "Dad, this really wasn't Liu Yun's fault, as you could see from the live broadcast." Xie Yixian suddenly stopped talking, not daring to continue. Chen Luo had said on the live broadcast that it was because of Xie Yuan, and now that he had mentioned it, it was like slapping Xie Yuan in the face. Sure enough, Xie Yuan became furious upon hearing this, and casually grabbed a piece of blue and white porcelain on the table and threw it at Xie Yixian. "You idiot! You actually thought it was because of Han Jiwei." Xie Yixian saw the porcelain flying over and hurriedly avoided it.
Dad, don't be angry, I didn't mean it because of you, just listen to my explanation.
Xie Yuan missed, and, furious, grabbed something else and started throwing it around. Then, while yelling, he said, "This Xishin would let himself get into such a desperate situation just for a promise, just to mess with our Xie family, what's in it for him?" He obviously had a plan for this from the beginning. Someone behind him must have been planning it, either the Feng family or the Zhang family. In Xie Yuan's opinion, there is no hatred without a reason, and no love without a reason. Everyone does things for a certain benefit. Either it is financial gain, or it is about relationships and status, etc. Chen Luo could not have done this simply because of a promise. Who would risk so much and risk their lives to keep a promise? Xie Yuan thought to himself, and stopped smashing Xie Yixian. He said coldly, "The blood and blood killer should still be in Pengchang, so tell them to send someone to kill this Yegami right away." Xie Yixian opened his mouth, looking like he wanted to say something, but stopped. "Dad, if we kill him now, everyone will know it was us." Xie Yuan looked at Xie Yixian like he was an idiot. First, there is a $500 million bounty on this Yegami, and the killer did it for the reward, so what does it have to do with our Xie family? Second, there were police snipers at the scene, so even if he is killed, everyone will just think that the police did it to rescue the hostages. Xie Yixian froze for a moment, and hastily responded, "I'll get in touch right away." Xie Yuan gave Xie Yixian a look of scorn, and then turned his gaze to a middle-aged man sitting on the sofa, who looked 70 to 80% similar to him. He said indifferently, "Boss, sell off all the industries and company shares that can be linked to our Xie family as quickly as possible. Contact Uncle Air in the United States and activate the plan to break the boats and start transferring assets." Xie Yinian, Xie Yuan's eldest son, was taken aback by the news. "Dad, if we do this, a conservative estimate would be that we would lose more than 50% of our assets. Have we really come to this?" Xie Yuan asked coldly. "What do you think?" Xie Yinian was suddenly at a loss for words and did not dare to ask any more. He immediately obeyed and went out to make a phone call. Dad, Lu Yun is calling." Xie Yixian had just finished contacting the killer when he noticed his phone ringing. He looked at the screen and saw that it was his daughter's number. He immediately exclaimed in surprise. Everyone in the living room was taken aback. Everyone knew that Xie Luyun had been kidnapped at this time, so when her phone rang, it was obvious that it was from the live broadcast. They all focused their attention on the TV screen, where the live broadcast was showing the image of the Rose restaurant. On the screen, Chen Luo, dressed in a white suit, was holding up a mobile phone. He smiled at the camera, waved, and pointed at the phone, obviously indicating that he wanted to answer it. Xie Yuan's expression changed slightly. For some reason, Chen Luo on the screen clearly hadn't said he was going to talk to anyone, but he could sense that Chen Luo was pointing at himself. "Give me the phone." Xie Yuan's gaze flickered, and he extended his hand towards Xie Yixian. "Dad, everyone in the world is watching this live broadcast right now, and if you answer the phone at this time, I'm afraid. If you don't answer it, won't that confirm our guilty conscience?" Xie Yuan sneered, "I really want to see what this kid is trying to do." Xie Yixian didn't dare to argue, and obediently handed over his phone. "Hello, Mr. Xie." Chen Luo's calm voice came from the phone. "Do you know who I am?" "Of course I do, Mr. Xie Yuan Xie Laoshang." Chapter 10, Bowing to Apologize. Xie Yuan was silent for a moment before slowly saying, "How did you know it would be me answering the phone?" Chen Lu laughed heartily, and his gaze turned to Xie Luyun in front of him. "It is said that like father, like son, but this saying seems to not work in the Xie family. Mr. Xie has 4 sons and 3 daughters, but most of them are mediocre, and they like to fight among themselves, not deferring to one another. As a result, even though Mr. Xie is almost 70 years old, he still hasn't chosen the next person to take the reins of the Xie family. In this situation, there are only 2 people in the Xie family who dare to answer my phone call, Mr. Xie and, of course, Miss Xie, who is in front of me. It's just a pity that if Miss Xie were a man, Mr. Xie would have probably already skipped the 2nd generation and made her the heir." When Chen Lu said this, Xie Yuan's expression in the Xie manner suddenly became very ugly, and even the expressions of Xie Yuan's 4 sons and a group of core Xie family figures in the living room became unnatural. Chen Lu's few words revealed how many core members the Xie family had in the current situation of the Xie family. And from the information revealed in Chen Luo's words, one could tell that he knew a lot about the Xie family. However, most people were extremely unconvinced, because Chen Luo's words clearly revealed contempt for the Xie family, meaning that only 2 people in the entire family were worthy of him. Xie Yuan was silent again, because he knew that Chen Luo was telling the truth. He was nearly 70 years old, and his energy and physical strength had obviously begun to decline. He had long wanted to retire. It's not that he doesn't want to let go, but the truth is that none of his 4 sons can give him peace of mind. Xie Yuan wants to find a suitable successor among the 3rd generation, but the grandchildren, with the exception of Xie Luyun, are all more than useless. It's enough to describe it in one sentence: they're all losers. People like Xie Yuan, from the older generation, have a strong preference for sons over daughters. In their eyes, daughters are ultimately someone else's, so Xie Luyun is destined not to become the heir. Xie Yuan had also lamented more than once that Xie Luyun was a woman, but in the end, he could only choose the tallest among the short ones. He was even forced to look for candidates to train within the 4th generation, although the oldest in the 4th generation was only in his early teens.
You didn't call just to tell me this nonsense.
Xie Yuan said coldly, if I'm not wrong, it was our competitor who sent you to abduct Luyun and slander me on the live broadcast.
Chen Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing when he heard this.
No wonder it was Master Xie. He had thought of a rebuttal in such a short period of time.
Chen Luo knew exactly what Xie Yuan was thinking.
The reason the other party dared to answer the phone was to tell the viewers watching the live broadcast that Chen Luo might have been hired and instructed to do this.
Xie Yuan sneered, did I guess wrong?
Everyone in this world does things for some kind of benefit. You, Yishan, have stolen treasures from all over the world in just 3 months and sold them at high prices on the black market. Even if you donated all the money to charity, stealing is stealing, and it doesn't change the fact that you are a thief.
What you want to obtain may not be financial gain, but fame.
I really can't understand why people like you would say such things, and why so many people believe you. Xie Yuan's righteous voice echoed through the restaurant through the phone speaker, and it was also heard by countless people watching the live broadcast. His words made many people in the broadcast room freeze for a moment, because most of them believed what Chen Luo said without thinking, and they never doubted whether this matter was true. Now that Xie Yuan had reminded them, many of the audience couldn't help but start to doubt. After all, Chen Luo was an international thief, and the credibility of what he said was questionable. Chen Luo, however, burst out laughing more and more happily. Old Master Xie, you were right about one thing.
I didn't call you to listen to this nonsense. I called you to make a request.
Xie Yuan heard that Chen Luo did not respond directly, and his heart immediately rejoiced. From his understanding of human nature, the more Chen Luo did not explain, the more the audience in the broadcast room would question.
I'd like to hear the details.
It's nothing, just ask Master Xie to go to the Han family and apologize by kowtowing to them. Xie Yuan's heart immediately filled with anger at these words, his face turning red, but he knew that he must not lose his temper at this moment. Xie Yuan sneered and said, although I have been to the noodle restaurant you mentioned, Jiwei Shen, I have definitely not done the things you said.
Don't even think about threatening me with this.
Chen Luo didn't seem surprised at all by this response.
He laughed and said, if you don't go, I'll kill Miss Xie.
As soon as Chen Luo said this, the restaurant fell silent again. Even Xie Luyun clenched her red lips, as if waiting for Xie Yuan's response. The audience in the live broadcast room also suddenly erupted. They didn't expect Chen Luo to threaten Xie Yuan with Xie Luyun's life. Xie Yuan almost didn't even think before he spoke, since you were threatening to take Luyun's life, even if I have not done the things you say, I will still do as you ask, even if I have to lose face. But after I have kowtowed and apologized, I hope you will let Luyun go.
If you are not convinced, I can be your hostage.
I have already lived for 70 years, and I don't have much time left. Luyun still has a long life ahead of her. The lower Xie Yuan's voice got, the more his tone became low, and by the end, it was actually tinged with a sob and a pleading voice. Xie Yuan's words immediately aroused the sympathy of many viewers watching the live broadcast, because what they heard was the image of a kind old man who, in the face of a fierce criminal, could only be forced to compromise and do his best to protect his granddaughter.
Chen Luo couldn't help but laugh again when he heard this.
He laughed so hard that it triggered his illness again, and he couldn't help but cough continuously.
Ha, ha, Grandpa Xie, it's really a pity that you don't go acting.
Chen Luo coughed violently, and his gaze turned to Xie Luyun again.
He smiled and gasped, Miss Xie, do you believe what Grandpa Xie said?
Xie Luyun's expression changed. She naturally knew what kind of person Xie Yuan was. If there weren't hundreds of millions of people watching this live broadcast, Xie Yuan wouldn't even watch her die before bowing to apologize to the Han family.
Xie Yuan agreed without hesitation, but it was just for show.
If he had refused, and was unwilling to kneel down to save his granddaughter, all those previously said righteous words would have been nothing but empty talk, and everyone would have questioned his character.
Chapter 11, The Super Revealer. Of course I believe what my grandfather said. Xie Luyun didn't believe Xie Yuan, but he also knew that he must not waver at this moment. Chen Luo laughed out loud. Good, very good, then I will give Grandpa Xie another option. After Chen Luo finished speaking, he suddenly took the computer and began to quickly type on it, finally pressing the send button. Grandpa Xie, I have sent some information to Miss Xie's father's email account. You might as well take a look and then listen to the other option I'm going to offer you. Chen Luo's mouth curved up in a smile, clearly not affected in the slightest by the situation. Xie Yuan's expression changed slightly. Chen Luo's expression was so relaxed, even as he guided the audience in the broadcast room to question Chen Luo and transform his image into that of a victim. However, Chen Luo didn't care at all, and instead calmly sent Xie Xian some information, which showed that the other party still had a backup plan. Xie Xian had already brought a computer over at this point, and hurriedly opened his email. Sure enough, there was an additional new email, but the content was quite large, with dozens of gigabytes of attachments alone. When Xie Xian clicked to open the content, his hand couldn't help but shake, and the laptop almost fell to the ground. Dad! Xie Yuan and the others had been staring at Xie Xian, and when they saw him let out a startled cry and look as if he had just lost his parents, they all had a sinking feeling in their stomachs. They knew there must be something extraordinary in the email. Xie Yuan's face turned black with anger, and he rushed over in a few steps, snatched the laptop from Xie Xian, and then went to check the content. The others were also extremely uneasy, and they also gathered around to see what was on the laptop. Xie Yuan saw the email body, and then clicked on the videos and photos in the attachments. His face instantly turned pale, and his expression became similar to Xie Xian's. The other members of the Xie family also looked as if they had seen a ghost, their faces instantly filled with panic, unease, and fear. The content of the email contained many illegal and unruly things that the Xie family had done over the years, including bribery, stock price manipulation, insider trading, hiring a hitman, money laundering, and possession of firearms. If these crimes were just mentioned, the Xie family would not be afraid at all, but the key is that Chen Luo's email contains a complete chain of evidence. From planning the crime to execution, there are photographic, audio and video evidence, and even confessions from the perpetrators. And these things were exactly what these people did, or they instructed others to do. They were certain that once this evidence was released, everyone present would go to prison, and they might even be sentenced to death. How did Chen Luo manage to do it? An immense fear arose in everyone's heart. The evidence falling into the hands of Chen Luo, who was hostile towards them, was like the end of the world. Of course there was no issue with Chen Luo being able to do it, because although he had only met Han Jiwei 10 days ago, it had not taken him long to gather evidence of the Xie family's crimes. During the previous rebirth, when he had seduced Xie Luyun, Chen Luo had deliberately spent some time gathering evidence of the Xie family's crimes in order to help Xie Luyun gain control of the family. With Chen Luo's almost omnipotent and omniscient abilities, it was not too difficult to obtain these things. For example, some things happened during the 90 days when Chen Luo was trapped. Chen Luo directly hacked their computers, phones, surveillance cameras, etc., and even filmed the entire criminal process. Moreover, the Xie family was not the first. One of Chen Luo's identities was the super revealer. Instead of digging up things about celebrities, he specialized in digging up the privacy and shameful secrets of important people. He was so bored that he investigated every important person in Pengcheng in detail, and finally went on to investigate all the super first-tier cities in the country, as well as the secrets of those super families abroad. In fact, it turned out that not many people could withstand the investigation. Chen Luo had countless dirty secrets about various important people in his hands, but because they would keep resetting, Chen Luo simply memorized them. As for evidence of related crimes, some cannot be discarded. For example, the evidence of the Xie family's bribery, they also wanted to keep it to threaten the recipients of the bribes, so it was preserved. Chen Luo knew where all this evidence was hidden, so naturally he found it easily. It is no exaggeration to say that Chen Luo now has more than 10 books worth of secrets in his hands, and if they were all to be revealed, it would be enough to turn the entire world upside down. Then, now, Grandpa Xie should be willing to hear about my other multiple-choice question. Chen Luo smiled slightly and continued, now, please choose between this file and Miss Xie. There are only 2 copies of this file, one I sent to you and one original backup. If you choose the file, Miss Xie dies, and I will erase the backup. If you choose to let Miss Xie live, I will release this file. You only have 1 minute to consider, so please be careful. As Chen Luo spoke, the restaurant fell silent once again. Everyone, except Xie Luyun, couldn't help but swallow. At this moment, even if Chen Luo wasn't threatening them, everyone could feel the pressure and tension coming at them.
The hundreds of millions of viewers watching the live broadcast exploded in an instant. They didn't expect Chen Luo to suddenly propose such a condition. But what made them even more curious was what Chen Luo had sent to the Xie family. Xie Yuan on the other end of the phone fell silent again, and Chen Luo didn't rush him. It was eerily quiet, and even the audience held their breath, nervously staring at the screen, waiting for Xie Yuan's answer. Xie Yuan silenced his phone and quickly instructed Xie Inian and the others to transfer their assets out as quickly as possible, no matter the cost. Everyone should go to Hong Kong first, and then move to Europe and the United States. Xie Inian and the others were now panicking, losing their composure, and waiting for Xie Yuan's orders. When they heard his orders, they all woke up from their daze and got up to start preparing to flee. Time's up. Chen Luo's indifferent voice drifted out of the phone. Xie Yuan answered the phone while walking towards the door. I can't believe a word you say. No matter what choice I make, you'll publish this information. You're giving me this choice because you want me to make a fool of myself in front of the whole world. Chen Luo, however, laughed in disbelief. Mr. Xie, I always do what I say and keep my word. Oh, I see, you're stalling for time and preparing to escape, aren't you? Chapter 12, Keeping One's Word. Xie Yuan's expression changed abruptly at these words, wondering how Chen Luo had guessed that they were preparing to withdraw. However, he knew very well that he must keep Chen Luo calm at this moment, otherwise once the phone call ended, or if he admitted it, he was afraid that the other party would immediately hand over the evidence to the police. Our Xie family has always acted with integrity, why would we need to flee? Xie Yuan snorted coldly, quickly slowing down his pace, adjusting his breathing before disdainfully snorting again. Chen Luo laughed silently. Oh? Then let's get back to the topic at hand. Grandpa Xie, please choose. Xie Yuan sneered. As I said earlier, why should I believe you? You're just trying to sow discord. Chen Luo laughed heartily. Grandpa Xie, you don't have a choice now. You have to take a chance. If you don't choose, the information will be sent directly to the police and released across the entire network, and your escape plan will be ruined. Xie Yuan on the other end of the phone was silent, because he knew that Chen Luo was telling the truth. Although the Xie family had connections with the police, if Chen Luo released that information online, who would dare to stand up for the Xie family? Moreover, Chen Luo's tone was extremely certain, and he expected that the Xie family was preparing to move. Once that information was exposed, if the police did not do anything, they would be drowned in the world's scorn afterwards. And once the police issue an order restricting the members of the Xie family from leaving the country, none of them will be able to escape. Chen Luo's words also aroused the curiosity of the viewers watching the live broadcast. They were very eager to know what Chen Luo had sent to Xie Yuan that made the entire Xie family prepare to escape. Judging from Xie Yuan's words and reaction, anyone with a little common sense could guess that what Chen Luo had sent must be something deadly. It may not be true that they are escaping, but it is true that Xie Yuan is panicking. Otherwise, he would not have suddenly softened his tone and questioned whether Chen Luo would keep his promise. After an awkward silence, Xie Yuan finally spoke, I choose. Wait. A crisp female voice suddenly interrupted what Xie Yuan was about to say. Not only were those present and the viewers in the broadcast room taken aback, even Chen Luo looked at Xie Luyun in his seat with some surprise. What does Miss Xie want to say? Xie Luyun looked at Chen Luo indifferently. Since you said you would keep your word, I now want you to fulfill that promise you made at the beginning. Chen Luo was momentarily taken aback, but then he quickly reacted and knew that Xie Luyun was referring to the sentence he had said at the beginning. As long as Miss Xie takes the initiative to kiss me, I will let you go. Chen Luo couldn't help but burst out laughing. Good, very good, you are worthy of being called Miss Xie, I admire you. No, I should say I like you very much, you are worthy of being the woman I like. Xie Luyun must have guessed what Xie Yuan wanted to say. Knowing her grandfather, there was a 99% chance that the other party would choose that information and give up on her. If Xie Yuan had said those words, even if Chen Luo had kept his promise not to leak that information, the Xie family's reputation would have been completely ruined. Xie Luyun could clearly see that Chen Luo was planning to destroy the Xie family little by little. Although it felt a bit unbelievable, Xie Luyun had begun to believe that Chen Luo had really been reborn 10,000 times, because what had happened to this mysterious man was just too miraculous, so miraculous that one had to believe that it was the only explanation. If Chen Luo had really been reborn 10,000 times, then everything that had happened today was probably within his calculations and control. Even if Xie Yuan had really said that he would give up Xie Luyun, Chen Luo would probably still have a backup plan to completely ruin the Xie family. Therefore, Xie Luyun interrupted directly,
asking Chen Luo to keep his promise. He would be in a dilemma no matter if he kept his promise or not.
If he let Xie Luyun go, the most important bargaining chip in Chen Luo's hands would be gone. If he didn't, it would be the same as admitting in public that he was a man of his word. As I said, I have many shortcomings, but keeping my word is one of my few strengths. As long as Miss Xie gives me a kiss, I will let you go and never go back on my word. Chen Luo said as he raised his foot and walked up to Xie Luyun, smiling and looking at her.
Xie Luyun's face clearly showed an uncomfortable expression, and she couldn't help but take a few steps back. But when she thought about what she had just said, she still suppressed the discomfort in her heart and walked back again. Chen Luo stood leisurely in front of Xie Luyun, then pointed at his mouth and bowed his head to come closer. The audience in the broadcast room were all stunned because they didn't know what promise Chen Luo had made to Xie Luyun before. When they saw that Chen Luo was obviously going to kiss Xie Luyun, they were all dumbfounded, not knowing how the wind had suddenly changed. You didn't say it was the mouth."
Xie Luyun clenched her red lips and glared at Chen Luo, looking extremely angry.
"The right of final interpretation is in my hands.
My kiss refers to a kiss on the lips.
Does Miss Xie have any issues with that?"
Chen Luo looked at Xie Luyun with a smile, speaking without haste. Xie Luyun's expression changed several times, obviously undergoing a fierce internal struggle. But after a moment, she still nodded her head in agreement. Xie Luyun gathered her courage, walked up to Chen Luo, and with a resolute expression as if she was about to sacrifice herself to a tiger, closed her eyes and kissed Chen Luo's lips. Chen Luo looked at Xie Luyun's frightened and shy expression, and suddenly placed the phone in his hand on the table. He put one arm around her waist and placed the other hand on the back of Xie Luyun's head, and immediately kissed her. When the two lips just made contact, Xie Luyun's body trembled, and an instinctive sense of disgust arose in her heart, and she was about to push Chen Luo away. But at this moment, Chen Luo suddenly embraced her, and used his tongue to pry open her mouth, giving her a deep tongue kiss.
Xie Luyun's eyes widened instantly.
She was both angry and anxious, and her body struggled violently to break free from Chen Luo's grip. At this moment, Chen Luo also suddenly opened his eyes, and suddenly reached out a hand, firmly grasping a dinner knife that was about to stab Xie Luyun's hand. Xie Luyun's expression was awe-inspiring at this time, and she turned her hand around and used her back elbow to slam it hard against Chen Luo's abdomen. Chen Luo smiled slightly, using his right foot as a fulcrum, his body spun rapidly, and he arrived behind Xie Luyun.
Not only did he avoid the strike, he also embraced Xie Luyun from behind. Xie Luyun's expression did not change at all.
The dinner knife in her right hand was thrust downwards behind her. Chen Luo laughed, his body slightly shrinking. After avoiding the strike, he lifted his thigh slightly, and it hit the numb point on Xie Luyun's right arm. A wave of numbness and weakness washed over her, and she could no longer hold the knife in her hand, which fell to the ground with a crisp sound.
Chapter 13, Fighting Master. Xie Luyun's expression was cold and unyielding.
She did not give up because of this, and her left elbow slammed back again, while her high heels also slammed down hard on Chen Luo's instep.
Chen Luo's smile grew even wider.
Without haste, he extended his left hand, and with a palm-turn finger technique, he once again tapped on Xie Luyun's left elbow's numbness point. Xie Luyun felt a huge numbness in her arms, and her hands hung down weakly. "Miss Xie, I already told you that I had a crush on you, so naturally I know that after you were kidnapped, you practiced martial arts diligently and even got a black belt in Taekwondo." Chen Luo staggered his feet slightly to avoid Xie Luyun's high-heeled shoe heavy blow, put his arms around Xie Luyun's waist, and leaned his head close to Xie Luyun's ear, smiling lightly. Xie Luyun suddenly felt extremely uncomfortable. She was already very resistant to any physical contact from men, and now Chen Luo was holding her tightly in his arms and leaning his head close to her ear to talk, which felt even more uncomfortable than if he had killed her.
"You, let go of me."
Xie Luyun struggled several times, but she couldn't break free.
Chen Luo looked weak and powerless, but he seemed to have a special technique for exerting force, trapping her tightly.
It felt like being wrapped in a giant python's coils, with no room to resist. The audience in the live broadcast room was stunned again. At first, the two were kissing, and the next moment they were fighting for their lives, which made them suddenly drop their jaws. What shocked them even more was that the fighting moves of these two people seemed insignificant to the people involved, but in fact they were fast and fierce, and the whole process took less than a minute. Even if they had not experienced it firsthand, just by watching the screen, they knew that Xie Luyun's skilled and swift attack moves would not feel good if they were hit. This showed that Xie Luyun should be a martial artist, and it seemed that he was also a master. When Chen Luo said that Xie Luyun was a black belt in Taekwondo, the audience once again erupted in applause, but what surprised them even more was that Xie Luyun, who had the standard of a black belt, was not Chen Luo's opponent. Chen Luo smiled, and immediately let go of his hand and released Xie Luyun. In fact, as early as when Xie Luyun proposed that he keep his promise, Chen Luo knew that Xie Luyun wanted to take him down in one fell swoop while he was weak, and completely resolved the crisis of the Xie family. That's why Chen Luo really admires this woman. There aren't many people in the world that he can look at and see something in them. Xie Luyun is one of those people. In this critical situation, what she's thinking about is not how to escape safely, but how to once and for all solve the Xie family's troubles. Xie Luyun knows very well that she and the Xie family are in the same boat. If the Xie family is finished, her end will never be any better. Chen Luo was able to restrain her very easily. Although he was weak, he had long since learned all the fighting techniques in the world. He used the famous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu against Xie Luyun, which is based on the skills of grappling and wrestling, with gradual submission as the basic tactic. Miss Xie can leave, including these people who are with you. Chen Luo smiled and made a gesture of invitation. Once these words were spoken, everyone in the Rose restaurant, as well as the hundreds of millions of viewers in the broadcast room, were dumbfounded. They didn't expect Chen Luo to actually let Xie Luyun go, and he could even take his entourage with him. This was tantamount to discarding all of his trump cards. At that time, the police no longer had any scruples, so wasn't Chen Luo just courting death? You really let me go? Although Xie Luyun's eyes revealed disgust, she was still a little surprised at this point. She just attacked Chen Luo, and if the other party uses this as an excuse, it's not surprising that she won't let herself go. Chen Luo gave a faint smile. I've said it before, I've always kept my word. Since you've been able to overcome your psychological obstacles, I naturally will keep my promise too, please. After Chen Luo finished speaking, he threw the key to the handcuffs to Xia Fan and said to her, untie them. Xia Fan was stunned for a moment. She looked at Chen Luo carefully and then at Xie Luyun. When she received a reassuring look from Xie Luyun, she hurriedly went over and untied the 4 bodyguards who were handcuffed to the ground. You guys leave first. As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned again, and even Chen Luo looked at Xie Luyun in surprise. Miss, are you okay? Aren't you leaving? Xia Fan was dumbfounded. She looked at Xie Luyun, who had sat back down as if nothing had happened, and almost broke down. The robber had said that they could leave, but instead Xie Luyun was staying. What was wrong with him? Not only did Xia Fan and the bodyguards have this thought, but even the people in the live broadcast room were dumbfounded. Chen Luo looked at Xie Luyun, who looked indifferent, and he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Because he laughed too hard, he coughed violently again. Hearing what Miss Xie said, he hurriedly fled, or else I will kill you all. Chen Luo took out a pistol from behind him and slammed it on the table. Xia Fan and the bodyguards were startled and dared not linger, hastily walking towards the elevator. Miss Xie, don't be impulsive. If there is anything, let's talk about it downstairs, okay? Zhuan Liming was so anxious that he wanted to jump up and down. He couldn't understand why Xie Luyun could obviously leave, but she still wanted to stay. Bang! Chen Luo grabbed the gun on the table, and without even looking, he turned around and shot Zhuan Liming. Zhuan Liming's eyes widened in horror. He never expected Chen Luo to shoot him without warning. At the moment the gun went off, he tried to dodge, but his body simply couldn't react in time. Zhuan Liming felt a wave of fear well up in his heart, and he desperately closed his eyes and waited to die. However, after a while, he did not wait for death. He only felt a cold sensation in his lower body, and he lost all other sensations. When Zhuan Liming looked down in shock, a face instantly turned red. It was because the bullet had scraped his crotch that he felt that cold and shivery sensation. Zhuan Liming was truly ashamed and angry, as well as terrified. The other party obviously had no intention of killing him, and if they really wanted to kill him, the shot would have directly hit his private parts. However, Chen Luo's shot passed by his crotch, obviously warning him. Zhuan Liming associated this with Chen Luo's sniper rifle that had just shot the sniper in the dark. From these 2 points alone, he could already see how terrifying Chen Luo's marksmanship was. Mr. Zhuang, if you say another word, the next shot will be an inch higher. Chen Luo turned his head and gave Zhuan Liming a slight smile. Now, please follow them and leave. Zhuan Liming's expression changed, and he didn't dare to say anything else. He immediately followed Xia Fan and the others into the elevator. Soon, only Chen Luo and Xie Luyun were left in the restaurant. Chapter 14, A Scary Man. Chen Luo looked at Xie Luyun, who was sitting across from him, with interest.
He asked with a smile, Miss Xie, do you really think I'm afraid to kill someone? Xie Luyun said indifferently, you're not afraid, but you won't do it. Chen Luo laughed, oh?
Why do you say that?
Xie Luyun said calmly, because your goal from the beginning wasn't me.
The kidnapping was just a way to create this situation, and your ultimate goal is just to destroy the Xie family. And I can sense that you are not only a person who acts recklessly and flamboyantly, but also have a deep-rooted pride. Naturally, such a person would not disdain to go back on his word. Chen Luo sighed with a palm-rubbing motion, saying that people should not be too clever, because people who are too clever are often narcissistic and prone to die young. However, there are too many stupid people in the world, and I still prefer to deal with clever people. After Chen Luo finished speaking, he continued to ask, so, Miss Xie, by staying, you want to stop me from destroying the Xie family? Xie Luyun shook his head and said, no. Since you said you have been reborn 10,000 times, you must have tried and made mistakes many times beforehand, and you have made thorough preparations.
Even if I leave, you will probably have a backup plan. Anyway, I'm leaving here, and there's nothing I can do. I might as well stay and see if you will actually die. Chen Luo said in surprise, you believe what I said?
Xie Luyun said indifferently, I can't figure out how you've managed to get this far no matter what, so the only reasonable explanation is the one you've just given. Chen Luo stared at Xie Luyun for a moment, then suddenly burst out laughing again.
Interesting. Do you know that I've told this story to many people, and Miss Xie is the first person to actually believe it?
Chen Luo has an excellent eye for people, and with his experience of living for more than 2,000 years, as well as his proficiency in psychology and other factors, he can tell whether most people in the world are lying or not just by looking at them. Xie Luyun really believed what he said about being reborn 10,000 times, and she even had the courage to stay and see if he would die today.
Even Chen Luo had to admit that this was a really interesting woman.
If he hadn't been reborn all along, he would have long since developed a playful attitude towards the world, and he might even chase after this woman in his next rebirth. Since Miss Xie is interested in watching me perform to the end, then naturally I will have to satisfy you. Chen Luo gave a slight smile, picked up the phone on the table again, and said to Grandpa Xie, you should already know what just happened.
Miss Xie is now a free agent, and the premise of the choice no longer exists. Then let's switch to another one.
Please ask Grandpa Xie to go and kowtow and apologize to Mr. Han's family, and I will delete the backup.
Xie Yuan's expression changed. He was a little unsure about Chen Luo at this time.
Since you are determined to destroy our Xie family, you will release that information regardless of whether I go or not.
Why should I listen to you? Chen Luo laughed, very simple, Grandpa Xie, you have no choice at all. If I release it, none of your family will be able to escape. You can only take a gamble now, and that is that I will keep my promise. At least until you go to see Mr. Han, I won't release the information, and I can buy you some time, don't you think so?
Xie Yuan's heart skipped a beat, and Chen Luo had truly guessed his thoughts. Xie Yuan actually planned to stall Chen Luo for a while, because Pengcheng was adjacent to Hong Kong, and it took less than half an hour to get there by helicopter. If he can just stall for half an hour, the Xie family will arrive in Hong Kong and be able to charter a plane directly to Europe and the United States. Xie Yuan had formulated the break the boats plan many years ago, as a precaution against the Xie family encountering a crisis like this. Xie Yuan was silent for a long time, and then said, okay, I promise.
Then please start, Grandpa Xie, and don't hang up during this process.
Xie Yuan did not say anything else, but instead pressed mute so that the person on the other end of the line could not hear the sound. Immediately, he turned to his eldest son Xie Inian behind him and shouted, transfer all liquid assets through an underground money exchange in Hong Kong immediately, and tell the blood hitman to go there right now.
Xie Inian hurriedly responded, picked up the phone, and hurriedly made the call.
Chen Luo smiled as he put the phone back on the table, then looked at Xie Luyun, who was sitting across from him, with a composed expression. It was only that it was approaching midnight, and Chen Luo's body was growing weaker and weaker, his face pale as paper. Even as he sat on the sofa, he was panting constantly, as if even breathing was difficult. Chen Luo struggled to pull a small box out of his pocket, took out a few pills, and threw them into his mouth. After these drugs went down his stomach, an unnatural flush appeared on Chen Luo's face, and in an instant, his entire person regained his radiant appearance, and even his breathing became much smoother.
Are you using stimulants?
Xie Luyun had been silently watching, and the man in front of her was mysterious and full of a strange charm. Even though he had kidnapped her and wanted to destroy the Xie family, she didn't seem to have much hatred in her heart, except for just now, that tongue kiss. Chen Luo nodded with a smile and said, "Well, I researched some gadgets myself. The function is similar to adrenaline, which completely stimulates one's physical strength, but the side effects are extremely great. However, there should be enough time." At this time, a ding suddenly came from Chen Luo's body. Chen Luo smiled and reached into his pocket to take out another phone, and clicked on a notification text message in English. "Your account 6265XXXX has received a transfer of $5 billion US. Chen Luo flipped the phone over, presenting the text of the message to Xie Luyun. "Does this number sound familiar to Miss Xie?" Xie Luyun naturally knew English, and when she saw the number, she didn't feel anything, but when she saw Chen Luo's meaningful smile, she suddenly felt a chill in her heart. Xie Luyun knew the Xie family's financial situation extremely well. The current liquid capital on the Xie family's books was almost exactly 30 billion renminbi, which was almost $5 billion US. "This is the Xie family's money?" Chen Lu laughed heartily. "It seems that old Master Xie is very efficient. It's been less than 10 minutes and he has already converted such a large sum of money into US dollars and successfully transferred it out." Xie Luyun immediately shuddered at the sound of this, and instantly understood something. She stared at Chen Lu with wide eyes, unable to speak for a long time. The man in front of her was really terrifying, so much so that a deep chill welled up in her heart that she could not suppress. Xie Yuan at the other end of the phone had actually been listening to the conversation at the Rose restaurant. When he heard Xie Luyun mention the Xie family's money, goosebumps rose all over his body, because he also sensed that something was wrong. Chapter 15, One Step Away. Xie Yuan hastily pressed the mute button, took out his phone, and dialed his eldest son Xie Enian. "Money, where did you transfer the money to?" Xie Enian heard his father Xie Yuan's agitated voice, and he was suddenly confused. It took him a while to say, "Our account at the Swiss bank." "Check. Is the money in the account?" Xie Enian also panicked on hearing this, and he hurriedly asked someone to get the computer and log in to the Swiss bank account to check. As soon as he looked, the blood drained from his face, because none of the money he had transferred in the past had arrived in the account. Dad, the money is not." Xie Enian's voice trembled with deep fear. When Xie Yuan heard what Xie Enian said, he suddenly felt dizzy and his body softened as he fell backwards. If it wasn't for the several bodyguards behind him who were quick-witted and quickly helped him, he would have fallen to the ground. It's over. Xie Yuan's anger was so intense at this time that it directly caused his high blood pressure to attack. When he found out that the Xie family's affairs had been broadcast live, Xie Yuan had already been furious, and he had taken a lot of medicine in a row to suppress it. Now he had received this fatal blow, no medicine would help. Not only did he not have the strength to do anything at this time, he even had some difficulty walking. Xie Yuan's heart was bleeding at this time. $50 billion was all the liquid capital the Xie family could take with them now. The rest was all real estate, such as real estate, etc., and it was not possible to convert this into cash within a day or two. And in a short period of time, to convert all the money into US dollars, you can only do so through underground banks, but for such a large amount and in such a hurry, the underground banks charge a very high handling fee. For transferring out $5 billion, they charged $1.5 billion, which is almost 30% of the handling fee. Now even if they run abroad, without this money, they are almost like dogs without a master. Everything you did before was ultimately to prepare for this step? Xie Luyun stared at Chen Luo in the Moonflower restaurant and asked with gritted teeth. Xie Luyun was no fool. After learning that Chen Luo had blocked the Xie family's money, she immediately understood what had happened. Just as she had predicted, Chen Luo's goal from beginning to end was to destroy the Xie family. Sending them to prison would not satisfy him, but rather he was going to directly destroy the foundation of the Xie family. Even if all the core members of the Xie family go to prison, there are still people in the family who have not committed any crimes and can inherit everything from the family, such as Xie Luyun in front of them. With Xie Luyun's abilities, even if she can't stay in the country anymore, she can simply sell the family's assets at a low price and immigrate abroad to start a new life. Now that Chen Luo has created a situation where it seems like the Xie family is about to collapse, Xie Yuan and the others are so panicked that they don't have time to think of a countermeasure. They just want to transfer their funds in the shortest amount of time and escape abroad. In fact, if she were in Xie Yuan's shoes, Xie Luyun would probably make a similar choice. This is the terrifying thing about Chen Luo. He had anticipated this from the very beginning, leaving Xie Yuan with only one choice. Then, when the Xie family tried to transfer the money through an underground bank, they intercepted the funds through some unknown means.
In other words, Chen Luo had anticipated even which underground bank Xie Yuan would use to transfer the money. Chen Luo gave a small smile. No, there is still one more step. Chen Luo said, while holding his phone. He first donated 3 billion from his account, and then transferred $2 billion to Han Jiwei's bank account in the United States from his early years. After doing this, he tapped a few times on his phone, and then played a recording. The blood of blood killers should not have left Pengcheng yet, so tell them to send someone to kill this Yegami right away. First, there is a $500 million bounty on Yegami. Boss, find out all the industries and company shares that can be linked to our Xie family. The moment Xie Luyun heard the voice, she knew it was Xie Yuan's. And when she heard the content, Xie Luyun's heart instantly sank to the bottom. She could guess without thinking that this was how Xie Yuan would handle this matter after encountering it. The hundreds of millions of viewers in the broadcast room were not as familiar with Xie Yuan's voice as Xie Luyun, and they were also confused at first. But after all, Xie Yuan had just spoken to Chen Luo a moment ago, and they reacted after only a moment that the person speaking was indeed Xie Yuan. The content of the recording proved beyond a doubt that Xie Yuan was acting when he first started talking to Chen Luo. Hiring a hitman and transferring funds in preparation for escape all proved beyond a doubt that the things the Xie family had done were true. If they could even hire a hitman, what was forcing the Han family to be their cooks for generations? The next moment, all the viewers felt cheated and insulted, and they became angry at the same time. Countless people cursed the Xie family in their friends' circles and in the live broadcast room. Chen Luo gave a faint smile and said to the camera, I will now post all the evidence of the Xie family's crimes online, and will send a copy to the police. As for whether the Xie family will receive the punishment they deserve, I invite the audience to monitor the situation. Chapter 16, Let's let this game rage on. Chen Luo casually opened his email and directly sent the complete information to the Pengcheng police's reporting email address, and also posted the information on many platforms. Xie Yuan, who had already boarded the helicopter, suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood when he heard Chen Luo's words, and then fainted. Dad! Dad! What's wrong with you? Xie Yuan's other sons were terrified when they saw the scene and hurriedly went to check on Xie Yuan's condition. Upon seeing this, everyone's faces changed miserably, because Xie Yuan was only exhaling through his nose and not inhaling, and it looked like he was about to die. The Xie family members were all panicking. Now that the sky had collapsed, they even lost their backbone. They suddenly felt that the end was really near. When Chen Luo had finished all this, he noticed that Xie Luyun was staring at him with a vacant expression. Does all this you have done have any meaning? Xie Luyun's expression had already returned to its calm and composed appearance. Just as you said, after today you will be reborn again, and everything will return to the way it was on New Year's Day. The Xie family will still be the same Xie family. Are you going to do it all again? Chen Lu laughed heartily, and instead of answering, he asked, Miss Xie, have you ever played games? Xie Luyun was momentarily stunned, and she quickly realized what the other person meant. Chen Lu was treating each rebirth as a game. Those who play games also know that the pleasure they get from playing is only temporary, and in reality they get nothing. Chen Lu shrugged, so what do you do? Then you just keep unlocking achievements in the game to maximize your pleasure. As I said earlier, I don't actually do this for any lofty goals, but just to keep myself from going crazy. I'm playing the identity of an urban vigilante, so naturally I want to bring this identity to the extreme and let this game rage on. Xie Luyun was silent. Although Chen Luo was smiling, the sense of loneliness that came through in his voice was extremely strong, and it inexplicably made her feel a little sympathetic. Chen Luo smiled, picked up his phone and tapped a few more times, and the screen showed the inside of the Xie family's helicopter. Xie Yuan had died suddenly, and his sons were crying loudly around his body, grief-stricken as if it were the end of the world. This scene was actually in Chen Luo's calculations. Xie Yuan had been suffering from high blood pressure for a long time after he grew old. He deliberately created such a big scene, not only to push the Xie family into a desperate situation, but also to send Xie Yuan to hell completely through layer upon layer of progressive stimulation. Seeing this, Chen Luo lightly tapped the camera with an indifferent expression and switched the camera again. The camera then switched to the rooftop of a skyscraper, where a blond man in casual clothes carrying a black suitcase stopped. He first placed the black case on the ground, then took out a sniper rifle from it and began to assemble it quickly on the ground. Chen Luo smiled and saw this, and pointed the phone lens at the computer lens. Here, let me introduce everyone. This is the ace killer of the international criminal organization Blood and Blood, codenamed Lucifer.
Not only were the viewers in the broadcast room stunned, even Xie Luyun had a stunned expression, not knowing how Chen Luo had inexplicably jumped here. However, they soon noticed the international criminal organization Bloody Bloody that Chen Luo mentioned, which was exactly the assassin organization that Xie Yuan had hired to come and kill Chen Luo before. As soon as they saw the assassin named Lucifer assembling a sniper rifle on the ground, everyone reacted. This was clearly an assassin sent by Bloody Bloody to kill Chen Luo. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief, unable to understand Chen Luo's thinking. He knew full well that the other party was going to use a sniper rifle to take him out, but he was still acting as if nothing was wrong, chatting and laughing with everyone. What shocked them even more was that Chen Luo was able to observe the other party's every move via his phone. It was obvious that he had set up a camera at the sniper point in advance, which was how he knew the other party's every move. How did he do it? The audience in the broadcast room simply couldn't figure it out. Knowing in advance that the other party was going to kill you is understandable, but knowing even where the other party chooses to kill you is a bit unbelievable. Many people don't know what the organization Blood and Blood is like. Even people at the level of Grandmaster Xie only know about their killer business, but in fact they do far more than that. Chen Lu took the phone back and continued with a smile, saying that Blood and Blood originated in Europe, but no one knows how long it has been established, not even the members of Blood and Blood. I spent more than 10 years tracking it down, searching through countless historical texts, and even captured a number of Blood members to force them to confess. It was eventually discovered that the earliest records of Blood can be traced back to the Middle Ages in Europe, and they became active during the Crusades. In other words, this is a mysterious organization that has been hidden in the dark corners of the world for more than 1,000 years. Chapter 17, I Bloom in Death. The Bloody Blood started out as a hitman business in the early years, but nowadays they no longer rely on this business as their main source of profit. As the saying goes, he who steals the country will become the ruler. The Bloody Blood has deep-rooted influence in various countries in the Western world. Their means of profit is to secretly manipulate the situation of a country in order to reap huge profits. For example, the Dubai debt crisis in earlier years caused the European stock market to plummet, but they already knew the outcome in advance. By heavily shorting Dubai's currency, they made a windfall profit of more than $10 billion. The subsequent Greek debt crisis was even a direct result of their taking advantage of the Dubai debt crisis. They continued to short the Greek currency and easily made hundreds of billions of dollars in profits again. When Chen Luo said this, not only were the viewers in the live broadcast room stunned, even Xie Luyun was so shocked that she couldn't speak for a long time. Not to mention the average viewer, even Xie Luyun never imagined that these international financial events were actually the result of someone secretly pushing them from behind the scenes. She originally thought that the level of her station was already high enough, but now that she has heard about the horror of the Blood organization, she has realized that she was too naive. The influence of an organization like Blood has long since been limited to Europe, and I'm afraid its power has spread all over the world. Chen Luo smiled and continued, Blood is jointly led by the 7 Titans. No one knows their real names, and they are only known by a code name, which is the name of a famous emperor in European history. For example, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Augustus, Charlemagne, Peter the Great, and so on. After the death of each Titan, the remaining Titans will jointly select the next successor to inherit the name. Chen Luo suddenly looked at the time on his phone as he finished speaking. Okay, it's about time for the science lesson to end. The audience in the broadcast room had been nervously staring at the computer screen, wanting to hear Chen Luo say more about the blood of blood. Because it was a world they could never touch, everyone's curiosity was piqued, but now Chen Luo suddenly stopped talking, leaving them in an extremely uncomfortable situation. Xie Luyun looked at the time and suddenly understood what Chen Luo meant when he said it was about time. At this moment, there was only 1 minute left until midnight. If what Chen Luo said was true, then he only had 1 minute left to live. Chen Luo got up, walked to the windowsill, and reached inside his suit to take out something that looked like a remote control. Let this fireworks display be the curtain call for this 10,000th rebirth. Chen Luo smiled and pressed the remote control in his hand. Boom! 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 Several loud explosions could be heard. Xie Luyun was shocked to see a ball of intense fire rising from the rooftop of a skyscraper 1,000 meters away, shooting straight up into the sky. And the sound of the explosion also came from above the Rose restaurant, directly shattering all the tempered glass exterior walls of the restaurant. Sky-high glass fragments rained down from the sky, and the wind also vented recklessly, blowing so hard that Xie Luyun could hardly keep her eyes open. After Xie Luyun recovered from her shock, she quickly came to her senses. No wonder Chen Luo knew that the killer called Lucifer was outside preparing to snipe at him. He didn't care at all, because in addition to setting up surveillance cameras there, he also placed remote-controlled bombs. The moment Lucifer set up his sniper rifle and was about to shoot, Chen Luo detonated the bomb, sending the killer straight to the Western paradise. And the bomb that Chen Luo set up here at the Rose restaurant was obviously not meant to kill anyone, but simply to blow up the glass. As for what he wanted to do, Xia Luyun guessed it as well. Chen Luo was standing at the edge of the glass exterior wall at this time, his white suit rustling in the wind. One step forward was a bottomless abyss, but there was not the slightest trace of fear in his eyes. Instead, he was beaming with a spirited smile. Chen Luo turned around and waved at Xia Luyun, saying, "When I wake up, I might come find you, see you there." After Chen Luo finished speaking, he opened his arms wide and let out a loud laugh into the sky. "I will bloom in the midst of death, just like that brilliant shooting star, leaving the most brilliant traces in the world." Xia Luyun sensed something coming, and her heart suddenly trembled. She rushed up from her seat, trying to grab Chen Luo and drag him back. Xia Luyun didn't know why. Clearly, the man in front of her had kidnapped her and destroyed the Xie family in front of her, but she didn't want to see this man with such strange charm die in front of her. However, her actions were too slow, and Chen Luo's body had already fallen backwards. When Xia Luyun reached the edge, she saw Chen Luo spread his arms towards the sky, as if he wanted to fly. As he finally disappeared from her sight, Chen Luo waved at her with a smile, not at all afraid of death. Xia Luyun was transfixed for a moment, biting her lip tightly. She didn't come back to her senses for a long time, until Chen Luo finally disappeared. Chapter 18, Reborn 18 years old. I don't know how long it took, but Chen Luo slowly regained consciousness and opened his eyes. What appeared before him was not the familiar doctor in a white coat named Li Hao, but an incredibly unfamiliar face. Chen Lu suddenly froze, because every time after rebirth, the scene was always in the hospital consultation room, facing his liver disease Dr. Li Hao. The one who spoke was usually, regretfully telling you that you have liver cancer, and you only have 3 months left. Does your family know? I suggest you be hospitalized and actively cooperate with treatment. Chen Lu has been reborn 10,000 times, and he is extremely familiar with this process. But he wasn't in a consultation room now, and the doctor in front of him wasn't the same one. Who gave you the courage to sleep in class? The angry face of the stranger glared at Chen Luo, and he reached out and slammed a textbook at Chen Luo. Did the bottom of the class give you the courage? Chen Luo frowned, and without panicking, he avoided the attack from the strange man. Chen Luo looked around the surroundings with surprise and disbelief, and was shocked to discover that he was actually in a classroom. Inside the classroom, dozens of students in school uniforms stared at him, their expressions ranging from playful to scornful to gloating. Chen Lu always felt that this place and these students before him looked familiar, but he couldn't think of where he had seen them for the moment. Chen Lu's heart grew increasingly puzzled. Had he been reborn in another place? The next moment, when Chen Lu saw the way he was dressed, he instantly froze. He was wearing a school uniform, and the words Longcheng High School were written on it. What the hell? Longcheng High School was his alma mater in high school. Although he only studied there for 2 years, he experienced the most humiliating thing of his life here, and he tried to commit suicide several times. So it was impossible for him to forget this school. What's going on? Chen Lu couldn't help but look down at his body, and only then did he realize that although he was thin, he felt completely different from when he had just been diagnosed with liver cancer. Put simply, he felt more energetic and more spirited than he had at that time. Chen Lu was in a state of amazement when he suddenly noticed a line of words written at the front of the classroom: 179 days until the college entrance exam. Chen Lu's heart shook violently. He saw the strange man waving his textbook furiously again and again. He grabbed the other person's hand and anxiously asked, "Which year is this?" The strange man was even more furious when he saw Chen Lu actually dare to grab him. He shouted angrily, "Let go of me! How dare you!" Chen Lu frowned and glanced at the man. The more he looked, the more familiar he looked. A sudden thought came to his mind: "Are you Wang Aihua?" The students in the classroom stared at him with wide eyes, their eyes filled with surprise. From past experience, Chen Luo should have been beaten up by the homeroom teacher Wang Aihua, and his parents would probably be called in for a lecture. But Chen Luo, who was now in front of him, reached out and grabbed the homeroom teacher's hand. Not only did he not show any signs of cowardice, but he even called Wang Aihua by her first name, with an attitude that exuded condescension. "You little shit, you're getting more and more lawless." Seeing that Chen Luo was holding onto her right hand, Wang Aihua slapped him with her left hand. Chen Luo impatiently pushed with all his strength, knocking Wang Aihua backwards and causing him to stumble a few steps, avoiding the slap. After pushing Wang Aihua away, Chen Luo immediately started rummaging through his desk.
He was anxious to determine the current timeline and didn't care about Wang Aihua.
Soon, Chen Luo found an old Nokia 3100 phone inside. When he got the phone, he quickly checked the time. When he saw that the phone interface displayed September 22, 2008, Chen Luo's body trembled violently, and even his hand holding the phone began to tremble slightly. This was the year of his 18th birthday. No way, I was reborn at the age of 18? Chen Luo muttered to himself. His voice was very small, but at this time, every sound in the classroom could be heard, and it was still heard by the entire class. Puff! I don't know who laughed first, but the whole classroom couldn't help but start laughing, although their laughter was full of sarcasm and mockery. They almost all thought that Chen Luo had been scared silly and had even said such crazy things. Wang Aihua, however, was furious and walked over angrily, wanting to continue to fix Chen Luo. At this time, he noticed that Chen Luo suddenly smiled. Chen Luo stared at the screen of his phone and suddenly burst out laughing, tears streaming down his face. He laughed so loudly that he fell backwards, looking like a madman. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Am I finally free from those damned 90 days? Chen Luo laughed maniacally while hammering on his desk, so excited that he was on the verge of losing his mind. Time is finally starting to move. Trapped inside those 90 days for more than 2,000 years, Chen Luo had almost gone crazy. He had almost died many times, and it was like the cruelest punishment in the world. Now that he had found himself reborn at the age of 18, Chen Luo felt like he had broken free from his prison and regained his freedom. Chapter 19, You're Still Alive. The students in the classroom and Wang Aihua were startled when they saw Chen Luo burst out laughing. Because Chen Luo looked like he was really crazy, it made people feel a little scared for some inexplicable reason. Chen Luo laughed for a long time, and as he laughed, he suddenly seemed to remember something, and he shuddered. If it was my birthday, then she's still alive. Chen Luo's body suddenly stiffened, and his head, like a robot, looked little by little towards his classmate. There appeared a girl with a perfectly shaped melon face, delicate and beautiful, extremely pretty. She exuded a natural aura, and this temperament was not something an ordinary girl could possess casually, and she was an 18-year-old girl. Gu Qinghuan. Chen Luo trembled, and a feeling of ecstasy even greater than breaking the time loop welled up in him. The next moment, to everyone's astonished gaze, Chen Luo leaned over and embraced the beautiful girl. You're alive, you're alive. Chen Luo's tears of excitement came down, and he was extremely afraid that this was a dream. In countless time loops, Chen Luo had wanted to do and could do everything, except for the girl Gu Qinghuan, who was forever a regret in his heart. In the year when Chen Luo was just in his senior year of high school, a girl transferred to the class, the same girl Chen Luo was now holding. Gu Qinghuan was so beautiful and had a strong aura, enough to make any girl at school feel inferior. Even most boys would inexplicably feel nervous when they saw her, and she hardly gave anyone a second glance, which deterred many suitors. Chen Luo knew from the first moment he saw this girl that he liked her, and she even became his classmate. However, he also fell into a deep inferiority complex. After being classmates for more than half a month, they had not said a few words to each other. At that time, Chen Luo was not as reckless and arrogant as he is now, playing with the world and taking everything lightly. In fact, Chen Luo's inferiority complex was not because Gu Qinghuan was too outstanding, but because of himself. Chen Luo was not a native of Pengcheng. He was born into a rural family in Hubei province. When he was in the 5th grade of elementary school, his parents came to Pengcheng to work and left him at his grandparents' house. His parents were both only junior high school graduates, and there were not many jobs they could do. They could only open a food stall in the market in the Hualong district of Pengcheng, getting up early and working late every day to earn a hard-earned living. In the eyes of his grandparents, their grandson was always an outsider, and they treated Chen Luo like a guest. Chen Luo stayed from 5th grade to 9th grade of primary school, a total of 5 years, and never received a penny of pocket money. It wasn't that his parents didn't give him any, but they gave it to his grandparents and never gave it to him. If his grandparents bought any fruit or the like, they would wait until Chen Luo wasn't there and then take it out and give it to their own grandchildren. His parents left him at the age of 10, and in his grandparents' house, he was not loved by his grandmother or his uncle, which caused the originally cheerful Chen Luo to suddenly fall into extreme inferiority. He even thought that his parents didn't want him anymore. This feeling lasted for several years. When he was in high school, his parents had saved up enough money to send Chen Luo to Pengcheng to attend high school. When Chen Luo arrived in Pengcheng, he became even more self-conscious and even shut himself off from the world for a time. He couldn't speak Cantonese and his speech still had a strong accent from his hometown, so he suddenly became the target of ridicule in the whole class, who made fun of his accent from time to time. Even if Chen Luo practiced his Mandarin and removed his accent, it did not change his position of being excluded in the class. Chen Luo also became the target of bullying. Running errands and doing chores, getting beaten up was common, and he was often robbed of all his pocket money. From time to time, he was also humiliated. For example, when doing chemistry experiments in the laboratory, someone deliberately sprayed him with a fire extinguisher even though there was only a small flame in the beaker. When the teacher asked what had happened, they said that Chen Luo's experiment had set fire to the table. When this became the norm, and it lasted for 2 whole years, Chen Luo had already developed depression, until this girl named Gu Qinghuan appeared. Chen Luo still remembers that day, when he stood on the edge of the roof. It is possible to survive a jump from the 7th floor, and if you do, it would be clean. If you don't survive, the biggest possibility is that you will become completely paralyzed, lying in bed unable to move, and then your parents will be burdened with taking care of you for the rest of your life. Chen Luo was shocked. He was dumbfounded when he saw that beautiful girl say such a thing to him. He didn't want to jump off the roof in the first place, but after Gu Qinghuan said that, he felt like crying but couldn't laugh. That was also the first time Gu Qinghuan had taken the initiative to speak to Chen Luo after transferring to the school a month ago. After that, Chen Luo's favorite thing to do in class every day was to sneakily glance at Gu Qinghuan next to him. After night study hall, he secretly followed Gu Qinghuan home. Night study hall in the 3rd year of high school usually ended at 9 p.m. Chen Luo's home was far away from Gu Qinghuan's home, but he was happy to do it. Spending an extra hour on the road every day was enough for him, as long as he could watch Gu Qinghuan. This seems like complete psycho-stalking to outsiders, and naturally it caused dissatisfaction among those who were pursuing Gu Qinghuan, especially a timid borderline character like Chen Luo. One of them, Nya Wei, was also the one who bullied Chen Luo the most. One time, when Chen Luo was tailing Gu Qinghuan again, he stopped him and started teasing and slapping him. He also forced Chen Luo to kneel down and kowtow, calling him grandpa. Chen Luo was terrified and helpless at the time, but was shocked to see Gu Qinghuan rushing out of the restaurant on the side of the road with a pot of hot water in his hands, and splashing it on Nya Wei and the others. While they were panicking and avoiding, Gu Qinghuan grabbed Chen Luo's hand and fled the scene. Chen Luo still remembers that the moon was very round and bright that night, and everything was shrouded in a hazy moonlight, full of a romantic atmosphere. Chen Luo watched blankly as Gu Qinghuan dragged him forward, running like crazy, and he just wished that time would remain frozen at that moment forever. After getting away from Nya Wei and the others, Gu Qinghuan just coldly said, "Don't follow me anymore," and left without looking back. Chen Luo knew that he had fallen completely in love with this girl from that moment on, but not long after this incident, he learned the shocking news that Gu Qinghuan had committed suicide. Chen Luo felt like the whole world had collapsed. Ever since his parents left him, his life had been spent in depression. Until he met Gu Qinghuan, who had illuminated his world like the sun. Just as he was preparing to work hard to be worthy of Gu Qinghuan, he suddenly received this tragic news. The blow to him was simply devastating. Chapter 20. Are you happy? Chen Luo was devastated after Gu Qinghuan's death, as if his life had lost all meaning. After that, Chen Luo was unable to take the college entrance exam in Pengcheng because he had a non-local household registration, and he was bullied every day at school, so he transferred back to the school in his hometown. However, his grades were already at the bottom of the class, and because of Gu Qinghuan's incident, he had no motivation to study. He didn't even get into a junior college when he took the college entrance exam for the first time, and he barely got into a third-tier university after repeating the year. Then he just muddled through the next few years, falling in and out of love at university, graduating and looking for a job. Before he knew it, he was 29 years old and had been diagnosed with cancer. It can be said that apart from his parents, Gu Qinghuan had the greatest impact on Chen Luo's life before the age of 29. Over the past 2,000 years, Chen Luo has also investigated the reasons for Gu Qinghuan's suicide at one point. However, 11 years have passed, and many clues have been completely severed. Chen Luo has looked for Gu Qinghuan's parents, relatives, friends and acquaintances, and their conclusions are surprisingly consistent. Gu Qinghuan does not seem like the type of person who would commit suicide, and there is no reason for her to do so. However, Gu Qinghuan left a suicide note, and the surveillance footage clearly captured her jumping off the roof. Chen Luo has also seen the content of the suicide note from Gu Qinghuan's parents, which only contains a few words. "There is so much ugliness in the world, I only hope that I will not be human again in the next life." When Chen Luo saw this sentence at the time, the impact in his heart was imaginable.
Chen Luo didn't know what Gu Qinghuan had experienced. The words revealed her disgust with the world, and she even begged not to be born again in the next life. But they also revealed her attachment to life, otherwise she would not have hoped for a next life. Chen Luo suddenly remembered at that time that it was not a complete coincidence that the day he wanted to jump off a building and commit suicide, Gu Qinghuan was also standing on the edge of the roof. He was afraid that she was thinking about suicide at that time. It was just that Chen Luo hadn't thought in that direction at all at the time, because he didn't believe that the peerless girl would choose to commit suicide. At this moment, Chen Luo discovered that Gu Qinghuan was still alive, and the ecstasy in his heart was imaginable. However, the expression on Gu Qinghuan's face was full of shock and anger, because she had only transferred to this school less than half a month ago, and she had not even spoken a word to this classmate, so they could be considered complete strangers. Now a stranger suddenly hugged her in front of the teacher and the whole class, and even if she was well-bred, she could not stand it. "Are you happy?" Gu Qinghuan asked lightly. Chen Luo was momentarily taken aback, and he suddenly burst out laughing, hugging Gu Qinghuan even harder. "Happy? Of course I'm happy. Whether this is the damned next reincarnation or if time has really moved, this is the happiest moment I've had in thousands of years." Gu Qinghuan, however, suddenly stood up, pushed Chen Luo away, and then kicked him with all his strength. Chen Luo was caught off guard and took a few steps back, and then felt a sharp pain in his calf. He had been kicked in the muscle by Gu Qinghuan, and the pain made him gasp in pain. However, Chen Luo was not annoyed, but instead laughed even more happily. Such intense pain meant that he was not dreaming, but had really returned to 2008. Gu Qinghuan kicked Chen Luo away, not stopping, but instead grabbed the books on the desk and smashed them at him. Chen Luo naturally would not lay a hand on Gu Qinghuan. He blocked with his hands while laughing at the infuriated Gu Qinghuan. The students in the classroom had already seen it with dumbfounded eyes. They first did not expect Chen Luo to brazenly hug Gu Qinghuan, nor did they expect the usually elegant Gu Qinghuan to suddenly strike out and hit someone, which was completely the opposite of her usual image. "Enough! Stop it all!" Wang Aihua's angry roar resounded through the classroom. Gu Qinghuan's hand movements suddenly stopped, as if she had realized that her actions had been a bit inappropriate. Her expression quickly returned to normal, and then she sat calmly in her seat, as if nothing had happened. The expressions of the students in the classroom fell silent. Wang Aihua had always had a bad reputation, often physically punishing students, so most of the students in the class were very afraid of him. In 2008, far less strict than in later generations, Wang Aihua dared to openly accept gifts from parents, and was extremely petty. Of course, he gave preferential treatment to students who gave gifts. In addition to arranging seats in good positions, they didn't even need to do the chores. Those who didn't give gifts would be picked on by Wang Aihua for various excuses, and then be ridiculed, belittled, and even publicly insulted. For example, just now, Chen Luo, Wang Aihua directly scolded Chen Luo as a dog, and this is not the first time. It is not that no parents have reported it, but Wang Aihua is somewhat related to the vice principal in a roundabout way, and in the end, it all just fizzles out. "Have you really gone completely lawless?" Wang Aihua roared angrily, rushed over again in a few steps, and without caring about Gu Qinghuan, reached out to grab Chen Luo's ear. Chen Luo looked away from Gu Qinghuan, glanced carelessly at Wang Aihua, reached out and quickly grabbed his wrist, then exerted a sudden force and brought Wang Aihua close to him. Chen Luo leaned over and whispered a word in Wang Aihua's ear, as if they were whispering. But the next moment, Wang Aihua's expression suddenly changed, as if he had seen a ghost. He pushed Chen Luo away violently, and his body stumbled backwards a few steps. His eyes were filled with fear, and he stared at Chen Luo, his lips trembling as he said, How do you know?" The students in the class had expected to see a familiar scene, but they didn't expect Chen Luo to say something in Wang Aihua's ear, and the other person's expression changed. Clearly, just now, he was still furious, and he hated Chen Luo so much that he wanted to eat him. But the next second, it was as if he had heard something incredibly frightening, and his face was full of panic and fear. The change was so fast that it was comparable to the face-changing in Sichuan opera. All the students were curious to death about what Chen Luo had said to Wang Aihua that could have scared him like that. Even Gu Qinghuan looked over with some surprise, and she couldn't help but feel a little doubt and curiosity in her heart. However, Chen Luo spoke so quietly that even Gu Qinghuan, who was right next to him, couldn't hear what he had said. Chen Luo glanced at Wang Aihua indifferently and said, "Teacher Wang, can we continue the lesson now?" Wang Aihua's face was a study in expressions, alternating between pale and white. The excitement was at its peak, and he repeatedly opened his mouth to say something, but when he looked at his classmates, who were all looking at him with curious expressions, he couldn't bring himself to say a word. Chen Luo smiled and returned to his seat as if he were alone.
Wang Aihua froze in place for a long time, just watching Chen Luo sit back down, and he didn't dare to trouble him anymore. His mind was now full of thoughts about how Chen Luo knew about that matter, and he had no heart to attend class anymore.
You study on your own.
For clarification, this is not the next reincarnation, but time really moved.
Chapter 21, I want you to fall in love with me.
After Wang Aihua left the classroom, he panicked and took out his phone to dial a number.
Our business, have you told anyone else?
A woman's voice came from the other end of the phone, but she kept her voice very low and sounded surprised.
Wang Aihua, are you fucking crazy? How could we possibly tell anyone about our business?
Wang Aihua knew that he had panicked so much that he had lost his mind a little. The woman on the other end of the line was not stupid. If that matter was mentioned to a third person, it would be like handing someone a handle. But one of my students, he knows about that matter, and he told me just now during class.
What?
The woman on the other end of the line exclaimed in shock, but soon she seemed to realize something, and she lowered her voice again.
Hold on.
The woman hung up immediately, and within a few minutes, she redialed Wang Aihua's phone.
What the hell is going on?
What did he tell you? The woman's voice was full of anxiety and anger.
Wang Aihua was still panicking at this point. How would he know why Chen Luo had called out the secret that only the two of them knew?
He knew about Bifang Garden, and also about the $1,000,000. The woman on the other end of the phone suddenly became breathless at the news, and her voice trembled involuntarily.
Wang Aihua, what's going on? Tell me clearly, how did he find out? I really don't know. Have you offended that student?
The woman on the other end of the phone seemed to have thought of something, and immediately asked. Wang Aihua was suddenly at a loss for words. He had offended Chen Luo more than once. Chen Luo's family had never sent him anything, and his academic performance was at the bottom of the class, seriously lowering the average score. He constantly found fault with Chen Luo and often punished him physically.
This was not just an offense, it was a feud.
Well, sort of.
Wang Aihua stuttered back. The woman seemed to know Wang Aihua extremely well.
She said angrily, Wang Aihua, you son of a bitch, I usually told you to behave yourself, and now look what happened.
That student must have followed you to find out about Bifang Garden. The woman suddenly felt that something was wrong.
Wait, if he only followed you and found out about Bifang Garden, that's not strange, but the 1,000,000, only heaven knows, the earth knows, and you and I know, how could he possibly know?
Wang Aihua was still panicking at this point.
He trembled when he heard her words.
Could it be that the school found out during the audit? You fucking idiot. If the school found out, you and I would have been in jail by now.
The woman unceremoniously started to scold Wang Aihua, and she went on for half an hour.
Wang Aihua meekly took the abuse, not daring to say a word in return. Did he say it in public or did he tell you in private?
The woman seemed tired of scolding, and finally remembered something, so she asked again.
It was more like something private.
Wang Aihua didn't dare say that because he was going to teach Chen Luo a lesson again today, and the other party had told him the secret. According to the situation at the time, it was indeed something private.
That means he wants a share of the benefits.
You ask him out tomorrow, and we'll try again to see what he's really up to and whether he has any evidence.
Then let's hurry and return the money, we've made enough anyway. If anything really goes wrong, we'll all go to jail.
The woman on the other end of the phone laughed angrily, saying, I told you last month to return it, but which son of a bitch had to be greedy and try to make more money?
Wang Aihua suddenly couldn't say anything, because he knew the person she was talking about was himself. Don't worry about the money, now you find out where that student came from and how he knew about that matter.
Oh, I know. Wang Aihua hastily responded, then hung up the phone and wanted to go talk to Chen Luo. But when he got back, he found that evening study had already started, and Chen Luo was naturally not in the classroom anymore. Chen Luo was leisurely walking next to Gu Qinghuan at this time. He didn't sneak up behind her like he had in a previous life, but strutted right next to her, with the two of them less than a meter apart.
Gu Qinghuan was extremely annoyed.
Ever since Wang Aihua left the classroom, this jerk had been staring at her, and in the end she had to use her textbook to block her profile to make it a little better. But even so, Gu Qinghuan still seemed to be able to feel Chen Luo's scorching gaze, as if it could penetrate the textbook. It was really unbearable, so she simply left early. But what Gu Qinghuan never expected was that this bastard rascal actually followed her home and stayed right behind her.
No matter how fast she walked, or how fast she ran, or how she threatened him, Chen Luo just wouldn't let go, like a doggy tag, and she just couldn't shake him off. What do you want?
Gu Qingyuan's face was full of annoyance, and she couldn't hide her disgust.
I want you to fall in love with me.
Chen Luo looked directly at Gu Qingyuan, without the slightest bit of concealment, his expression incredibly sincere. Gu Qingyuan seemed to have heard the biggest joke in the world, and just coldly snorted and turned around to leave. It was only at the moment of turning around that Gu Qingyuan's eyes inexplicably flickered. Because Chen Luo's eyes revealed an incomparably burning light, a kind of deep and focused gaze, which caused a rare tremor in her heart. The reason for her shock was not because of what Chen Luo had said, but because she was surprised that the person sitting next to her seemed to have suddenly changed. In the past, Chen Luo exuded a timid aura, always walking with his head down, never daring to look her in the eye, and not even daring to speak to her. However, the moment he was woken up by Wang Aihua for sleeping in class, Chen Luo seemed to have become a different person. The timidity and inferiority he had felt before disappeared without a trace. Instead, there was an arrogance from within, and a hint of recklessness, like a sword that had been unsheathed, sharp and unforgiving. What had happened this evening made Gu Qingyuan realize that she had to re-evaluate Chen Luo. I'm warning you, if you follow me again, don't blame me for being rude. Gu Qingyuan turned her back on Chen Luo and coldly dropped these words before continuing to walk towards the front. Chen Luo smiled, and was about to continue following her, but suddenly he heard a teasing cry behind him, "Little trash, didn't you hear Miss Gu say not to let you follow?" Chen Luo's footsteps suddenly paused. A trace of a curve appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he immediately turned slowly and looked at the several students walking towards him. The person leading the way was Nye Wei, who usually liked to bully him the most. Chapter 22, How did he know? Chen Luo's face was smiling, but his eyes were flashing with cold light, looking at Nye Wei's gang like a blade. Over the past 2 years, Nye Wei had bullied him countless times, and he was the one who started calling Chen Luo trash. He had wanted to kill himself many times, and it was all because of this person. Nye Wei's father, Nye Zhiming, runs a construction company in Hualong district. Although it's not a big deal in the whole of Pengchang, it's still considered to be a small force in Hualong district. Nye Zhiming is a businessperson and naturally very good at making friends. Although he has a lot of connections with the leaders in the district, he doesn't take the school leaders lightly. Not only has he given a lot of gifts to the school leaders, but he has also given a lot of benefits to people like Wang Aihua, who are not on the same level as him. Therefore, whenever Nye Wei got into trouble at school, he was able to suppress it as much as possible. Wang Aihua even turned a blind eye to it. Over time, Nye Wei became a bully. Although Chen Luo never said anything, his parents naturally noticed the issue when he kept coming home with bruises. They guessed that Chen Luo must have been bullied, and when they asked him what had happened, Chen Luo didn't say anything because he knew it was useless. As it turned out, Chen Luo's parents went to the teacher and the headmaster to report the issue, but not only was the issue not dealt with, they were even given a cold shoulder. Chen Luo knew that this made him feel even worse, so every time he was beaten, he would protect his face so that his parents wouldn't notice anything. "Hey, little trash." Nye Wei walked up, his arrogant expression filling his face, and he spoke to the other person, but suddenly stopped, because he suddenly noticed Chen Luo's cold eyes. From a distance, it was too dark for him to see Chen Luo's expression and eyes clearly. When they got closer, Nye Wei and the 3 people behind him were stunned at the same time. Chen Luo's eyes at this moment were extremely terrifying. It was as if an incredibly terrifying prehistoric beast was looking at them, and they felt a chill rush from the soles of their feet to their brains, causing their bodies to freeze instantly. Chen Luo has killed tens of thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in these 2,000 years, and that killing intent will not disappear with the passage of time. At this time, when Chen Luo released all of it, where could Nye Wei and these people resist it? Gu Qingyuan had already walked a distance by this time. When she heard Nye Wei's words, her figure paused slightly, and then she turned around and looked over. She had seen this kind of scene several times before, but in the past, Chen Luo never resisted, so she didn't bother. However, at this moment, Gu Qingyuan was a little curious. The temperament that Chen Luo was exuding now was completely different from before. Would he still get beaten up like before? But when she turned her head to take a look, she noticed that Nye Wei and the others were frozen in place, their faces full of shock. Gu Qingyuan felt a little surprised. She didn't know what had happened, and she didn't know why Nye Wei and the others were so shocked. Gu Qingyuan was curious and wanted to get a little closer to find out what had happened. Chen Luo leisurely paced up to Nye Wei, leaned over and whispered in his ear, "You were driving without a license, hit and killed someone and fled the scene. You think your father, Nye Zhiming, getting someone else to take the fall was foolproof, and no one else knows about it?" When Nie Wei heard this, his body suddenly trembled. His eyes were wide and full of disbelief. He simply could not think of how Chen Luo knew about this. You. Nie Wei was at a loss for words, looking at Chen Lu, and after a long time, he couldn't come up with a complete sentence.
You want to ask how I know?
Seeing Nie Wei's panicked look, his eyes full of nervousness, wanting to hear Chen Lu tell him the answer. Once this matter is exposed, even if his family is rich, he will most likely go to jail.
This is more important than teaching Chen Lu a lesson. What he wanted to ascertain now was how much Chen Lu knew and whether there was any evidence.
Chen Lu gave a faint smile and spoke in a nonchalant manner. If you want no one to know, you must not do it. Now, you will slap yourself, and you are not allowed to stop until I tell you to. Although Chen Lu's physical fitness was a little worse now, it was still far better than when he had cancer, and it was not at all laborious to teach people like Nie Wei a lesson. It was just that Chen Lu was too lazy to do it, or rather, he did not care to argue with a character like Nie Wei. After Chen Lu finished speaking, he didn't even bother to look at Nie Wei again, but instead crossed his arms and slowly turned around, walking towards Gu Qinghuan.
If I don't hear any movement within 3 seconds, I'll go to the police station tomorrow to report someone. Nie Wei's expression changed dramatically. He didn't know how much Chen Luo knew, but if he really did what Chen Luo said at this time, then in the future, he might be controlled by Chen Luo in every way. Especially since the person in front of him was someone he had previously despised and oppressed. The situation had suddenly reversed, and Nie Wei couldn't accept it for a while. Go ahead. The police are idiots.
What do you say? And they believe everything. Nie Wei shouted at Chen Luo, his voice harsh but weak. Chen Luo still didn't turn around, but just chuckled lightly and spoke again. July 29, 2008, 11:35 p.m., the intersection of Jiangning Road and Hanghai Road. Nie Wei's expression suddenly froze upon hearing this, and he looked at Chen Luo's gradually receding back like he had seen a ghost.
Because the time and place Chen Luo mentioned matched the time and place of his hit-and-run.
Nie Wei could only remember that it was around 11 p.m., but Chen Luo even knew the exact minute.
This guy was there.
But it was late at night, and it was a quiet, deserted street, and he clearly remembered that there was no third person at the scene.
How did he know?
Nie Wei was amazed, feeling his head buzzing.
It's been almost 3 seconds. If I don't hear a sound, you'll be responsible for the consequences.
Chen Luo still didn't turn around, but his voice was full of a teasing tone. Nie Wei's heart suddenly jumped, not knowing whether to believe Chen Luo or not, but at this time, under the strong psychological pressure, he had already instinctively reacted. Nie Wei gritted his teeth and raised his hand to slap himself hard in the face.
Pop. When the crisp slap sounded, Nie Wei's entourage and Gu Qinghuan were both stunned.
They had been listening to Nie Wei's conversation with Chen Luo, but because they hadn't heard Chen Luo and Nie Wei's initial whisper, they had no idea what had happened. However, they all knew that people like Nie Wei were used to being arrogant, so how could they have slapped themselves in the face because of a few words from Chen Luo?
Chapter 23, Extremely Interesting Girl. However, what they never expected was that Nie Wei was actually slapping himself in the face. What the hell happened? Gu Qinghuan and the other followers looked equally confused.
Chen Luo seemed to have a strange ability to get people to do whatever he wanted with just a few words. Just now in the classroom, it was Wang Aihua, and now here with Nie Wei, there was another strange scene. But judging from the expressions and words of these two people, they must have been caught by Chen Luo, otherwise these two people, who usually bullied Chen Luo the most, suddenly changed so much. After Nie Wei had slapped himself several times in a row, he seemed to suddenly come to his senses under the intense pain. He suddenly paused in his actions, even though Chen Lu knew the exact time and place, but it had been several months, and the case had already been concluded. Even the police couldn't find any other suspicious points at the time, so even if Chen Lu went to the police station to report it now, without any evidence, how could the police believe him? Moreover, he often bullied Chen Lu in the past, and they had intense conflicts. At that time, the police will only think that Chen Luo is deliberately seeking revenge and falsely accusing him. I'm afraid they won't investigate the car accident, but will first let the school and parents educate him properly. Nie Wei suddenly woke up when he thought about this, knowing that his mind was still too slow to react and that he had been scared by Chen Luo. Now he was slapping himself in front of these followers and the goddess Gu Qinghuan, which was simply humiliating.
You don't have any evidence at all, do you?
Chen Lu suddenly stopped and suddenly turned around and looked at Nie Wei, laughing loudly.
It seems that you are not really stupid. Slapping yourself a few times has finally made you a little bit more sober.
When he saw Chen Lu stop and turn around, Nie Wei's eyes were full of hatred, anger, and pain, as if he wanted to eat him. But although Niue's heart was filled with rage, he did not dare to act rashly at this time. Chen Luo didn't have any evidence, but he knew about this strange matter, which had already shocked Niue.
He now just wanted to contact his father Nie Jiming immediately and tell him about it.
Chen Luo let out a smile, and then said with a smile, "I like this look very much, keep it up, and remember to come find me for revenge." After saying this, Chen Luo never looked at Niue and the others again, and continued walking towards Gu Qinghuan.
Okay, the trash is taken care of, let's go. Gu Qinghuan rolled her eyes.
Chen Luo's words made it sound like he was waiting for him, completely treating her like an outsider.
Gu Qinghuan snorted in annoyance, turned around and left, as if she didn't even bother to pay Chen Luo any mind. Chen Luo leisurely followed behind, smiling and saying, "How can I make you fall in love with me?" Gu Qinghuan was instantly speechless upon hearing this.
She had many suitors, and many of them had tried all kinds of romantic means to woo her, such as laying flowers in the path, holding banners, and so on. But she had really never encountered anyone as strange as Chen Luo before.
No girl would bother to answer such an issue, let alone Gu Qinghuan. In your next life. However, Chen Luo did not look the least bit discouraged upon hearing this.
Instead, he thought about it seriously for a moment, and said, "In my next life, I might not be reborn at the age of 18, and then I would lose you again." Gu Qinghuan turned her head in surprise and looked at Chen Luo. Seeing his serious expression, she didn't know how to respond for a moment. Chen Luo had said during evening study that he had been reborn at the age of 18, and now he was repeating it in front of her.
This guy has watched too many time travel movies and novels, thinking he is crazy, or does he think others are stupid? Gu Qinghuan didn't bother to pay any attention to Chen Luo anymore, and quickened her pace to walk forward. Chen Luo followed leisurely behind, still beaming with a smile. But after following for a while, the smile on Chen Luo's face suddenly stopped. Because at some point, Gu Qinghuan walked into a police station on the side of the road. Chen Lu reacted in an instant, and Gu Qinghuan was clearly preparing to go find the police officer. Chen Lu laughed silently. He rubbed his nose, feeling that Gu Qinghuan was extremely interesting. However, this place was not far from Gu Qinghuan's home, and nothing should happen. After thinking about it, Chen Lu decided not to trouble the police officer, and immediately turned around and walked towards his home. Gu Qinghuan looked back at Chen Lu as she was about to step into the police station. Seeing that he had sensibly turned around and walked away, she snorted lightly and did not continue walking in. Chen Lu did not follow Gu Qinghuan simply to harass her, but to get to know her better. In his previous life, Chen Lu had only known Gu Qinghuan for less than 3 months, and he did not dare to take the initiative to talk to her, so he knew very little about her. Apart from her name and age, where she lived and the basic situation at home. He didn't even know her hobbies, what she liked and what she disliked. During the 90 days he was trapped, after investigating the cause of Gu Qinghuan's death to no avail, Chen Luo never dared to touch anything related to her again. Because Chen Luo's life as a prisoner was already driving him crazy, to recall Gu Qinghuan again would undoubtedly double his pain. When he thought about this, Chen Luo suddenly frowned. What on earth happened that allowed me to return to 2008, and incredibly coincidentally, it was also the day of my 18th birthday, the one period of time I most wanted to undo. Chen Luo was trapped inside those 90 days, and had more than once wondered why such a thing had happened, and why it was him. God, fate, curse, etc., all kinds of reasons that could not be explained by common sense. Chen Luo had guessed at all of them. But none of them could be verified, and this had always been the biggest mystery in Chen Luo's mind. Chen Lu carefully thought back. Nothing special happened during the 10,000th rebirth, and he didn't meet any special people, but why did the cycle suddenly break? Chen Lu racked his brain for a moment, and an incredibly frightening thought suddenly occurred to him. Could it be that the cycle was being manipulated? As soon as Chen Lu thought of this, he felt a little funny himself, and shook his head as if trying to convince himself. No way. If someone really was manipulating it, wouldn't that person be like a god? Is there a god in this world? Chen Lu has lived for thousands of years, but he hasn't seen any gods. Forget it, I don't want to think about it anymore. This issue is a dead end. Chen Lu didn't figure this out in those 2,000 years, so he's not going to figure it out in a short period of time. However, now that he has suddenly been reborn at the age of 18, one issue that has been troubling him has disappeared. That is, the liver cancer was gone. Chen Lu was very sure that he did not have liver cancer at the age of 18, because physical examinations were required for the college entrance examination. He had gone for a physical examination both the first time and the time he repeated the exam, and his body did not have any problems.
In fact, when Chen Luo reached the medical level of max, he already knew where his cancer came from.
Chapter 24 Ways to Make Money.
While Chen Luo was still in the prison of the world, he found out the source of his liver cancer. When Chen Luo was at university, he was already 20 years old, which means he was infected between the ages of 20 and 29. There are two most direct factors that can cause liver cancer: excessive alcohol consumption and viral hepatitis, which is usually contracted through infection. Unfortunately, Chen Luo had both. Chen Luo himself did not have liver disease, but when he was at university, he had a girlfriend who displayed symptoms that strongly resembled a carrier of viral hepatitis. For example, fatigue, loss of appetite, abdominal distension, jaundice, etc. But at that time Chen Luo didn't care. And during the period from college to entering society, Chen Luo's life was also very miserable. He was either a dog licker or a spare tire. He was also ostracized and bullied at work, and was a complete loser. Over time, he learned to find solace in alcohol, and he didn't know when to stop. Under the combined effects of the two, Chen Luo's viral hepatitis quickly deteriorated into liver cancer. When Chen Luo found out the root cause back then, he also went after his ex-girlfriend for revenge, but soon it became boring, because taking revenge on her wouldn't change the fact that he was stuck there for 90 days.
When everything resets, everything loses its meaning. Now reborn at 18 years old, he no longer has this worry that bothers him. But this body in front of him is still a bit too weak. Although he is 1.8 meters tall, he doesn't have much muscle mass and looks like a skinny bamboo stick. Then start exercising from now on. Chen Luo lifted his feet and ran towards home. Chen Luo's home was half an hour's walk from school, but he had followed Gu Qinghuan the whole way, so it took nearly an hour to run back. Although it was called home, it was actually a rented house that Chen Luo's parents had rented for more than 10 years. Because his parents had always sold vegetables in the market downstairs, it was very convenient to live here, and they had never changed their address, so Chen Luo was not afraid of forgetting where his home was. When he arrived home, it was already past 11 p.m.
His parents had to get up at 2 a.m. to go shopping, so they went to bed around 9 p.m. every day and slept during the day. When Chen Luo opened the door and went in, he found a birthday cake on the table and a birthday card with 500 yuan in it.
"Happy birthday, son."
Chen Luo felt warm in his heart. No matter how many times he was reborn, his parents would always be the ones who cared about and worried about him the most. Chen Luo frowned and looked at the rented house in front of him. He felt extremely uncomfortable. Except for the first few rebirths, Chen Luo had never lacked money, because even if he just went to buy a lottery ticket, he could earn more than enough money to spend for 3 months. Therefore, Chen Luo had the best in terms of food, clothing, housing and transportation, but the environment of the rented house in front of him was too poor. Although it was said to be a 2-bedroom, 1-living-room apartment, the living room could only fit a table and a refrigerator, and the family felt cramped even when sitting down to eat. Chen Luo's room could only fit a bed and a desk, and there was no room for a chair, so he had to sit on the bed. What's more, the window was blocked by another building, so even in the daytime, he had to turn on the lights to see. His parents' room was slightly bigger, but there was only an extra closet. The three of them were crammed into a space of less than 40 square meters, and it was a little hard for Chen Luo to adapt at first. It seemed that he had to make money as quickly as possible. Chen Luo pondered for a while, put the 500 yuan away, took a bite of the cake, put it in the fridge, and then went into his room.
As soon as he entered, Chen Luo couldn't help but feel a headache.
There was only one word to describe what he saw, and that was a dog kennel. Under the bed was a mess, with shoes, books covered in a thick layer of dust, and all kinds of messy things stuffed under the bed. The bed was also messy, with 5 or 6 books thrown about, the pillowcases and quilt covers all darkened, and the clothes he had changed into thrown haphazardly on the bed.
Chen Luo sighed. In the past, Chen Luo might not have felt anything when he saw it, but now he didn't even want to spend a moment in this room. Chen Luo actually knew why this was the case. At 18 years old, he had given up on himself, didn't care about his appearance at all, and even less about his room. Even if his mother Li Yin helped him clean up every time, it would quickly return to the way it was. Chen Luo took a deep breath and said, "Okay, I'll clean up after myself." Chen Luo quickly began to tidy up his room while pondering how to make money. He had been reborn 10 years ago, so there were naturally countless ways to make money, but he wanted the fastest and safest method that could quickly change his parents' living conditions without causing them to worry. The first thing that came to Chen Luo's mind was the lottery. Unfortunately, Chen Luo only remembered the winning numbers from New Year's Day to April 1, 2019. As for 2008, there was no way he could have bothered to remember them. The next best thing was gambling on football matches.
He knew exactly which teams had won the World Cup and European Cup in previous years and the scores. However, the European Cup had just ended, and the most recent World Cup was in 2010, which was still in the future. Chen Luo's eyes suddenly lit up, and he thought of stocks. Although the global economic crisis in 2008 was triggered by the subprime mortgage crisis in the United States, China was spared the severe impact of the financial crisis due to factors such as the fact that the capital account of the balance of payments had not yet been fully opened, the scale of asset securitization was still in its infancy, and there were large amounts of foreign exchange reserves. It even ushered in the eighth bull market in the stock market, which lasted more than 9 months and did not end until August 2009. During the stock bull market, the effect of making money was extremely strong due to the influence of market sentiment. All investors were very optimistic, everyone wanted to buy stocks, and almost all stocks would rise. Chen Luo suddenly revealed a playful smile at the corner of his mouth, because he knew where to get the money to buy stocks. The sentence he told Wang Aihua tonight was, "Buy Fanjuan 2303, embezzle 1 million yuan of school funds." This sentence is closely related to this round of bull market. The cause of the incident is actually quite simple. Wang Aihua has been playing the stock market for many years. When he discovered this round of bull market, he persuaded his mistress, Luli, the school's finance officer, to embezzle public funds and use them to speculate in stocks. The two of them were extremely lucky. The stock they bought had a continuous trading limit for more than 10 times in just 1 month, and the original 1 million yuan had skyrocketed to more than 5 million yuan. But even with so much money, these two people did not dare to spend it recklessly. After all, it was embezzled public funds, and if someone with an interest found out, they would also suffer greatly. So these two people spent 2 million yuan and bought a house in the upscale community of Bifan Garden in Hualong district. First, it was used as a place to meet in secret, and second, it was used to hide the remaining millions of cash. As for Chen Luo knowing about this, it was also very simple. Because the two broke up later, and because there was an uneven distribution of the spoils, a murder occurred, which led to the matter eventually coming to light and ending up in the news. Chen Luo, who was studying at university at the time, happened to see this news and felt great satisfaction, so naturally he remembered it. Chapter 25, New Goals. When Chen Luo thought about this, a plan took shape in his mind. Chen Luo's thoughts turned, and he began to consider the next more pressing issue. Gu Qinghuan committed suicide in the second month after his birthday, which meant that he had 2 months to figure out the reason for her suicide and save her. Chen Luo felt that his rebirth on his 18th birthday was no coincidence, and perhaps Gu Qinghuan was the reason. Moreover, Chen Luo also thought of one thing, and that was that it had only been about a month since Xia Luyun was kidnapped by Li Zishuan. Xia Luyun had once told him that the date was October 23rd. That incident had caused immeasurable harm to her, and it had been a shadow that had accompanied her for more than 10 years, something she would never be able to forget in her life. Since the date of the incident was just a month after Chen Luo's birthday, he had easily remembered it. A strange thought arose in Chen Luo's mind again. It seemed that the major events that had happened to these two girls had all happened during the period after his 18th birthday. Both of these girls also occupy a certain position in Chen Luo's heart. Is it really just a coincidence? Chen Luo couldn't help but shake his head when he thought about this, and he didn't intend to delve deeper. Just thinking about this issue would be a dead end, and there was simply no answer to be found. Since he had broken out of that time prison, he had to cherish everything in front of him. At least now he had a new goal. By the time Chen Luo thought about this, the room had already been cleaned up by him. The room was only about 10 square meters, and it took less than half an hour to clean it up. Looking at the room that had been given a new lease of life, Chen Luo's mood inexplicably lightened. The next morning, at 6 o'clock, Chen Luo got up from bed. He looked around the house for some wire and a screwdriver, grabbed his school bag and left the house. Morning study time was at 7 o'clock, and Chen Luo usually left the house at that time. However, he was not going to school for morning study now, but to Bifan Garden. Chen Luo didn't know the location of Bifan Garden, but the taxi driver definitely did. He hailed a taxi on the roadside and reached Bifan Garden in 20 minutes. Although this was an upscale residential area, because it was a new building, many of the residents' houses were still under renovation and not many people had moved in. As a result, even the property management company had not moved in, and there was no surveillance, so Chen Luo was able to enter the community without any problems. After finding Building E, Chen Luo took the elevator directly to the 23rd floor. Chen Luo's purpose in coming here was to take the more than 2 million yuan in cash that Wang Aihua and Luli had stored here. The reason he dared to come in so openly was that he knew Wang Aihua and Luli could not possibly be here. Because both of them had their own families, they would not stay here overnight, and they would definitely be sleeping in their respective homes at this point. Even if they were here, Chen Luo was not at all intimidated, as he had the two in his hands and was not afraid at all. Chen Luo could actually threaten Wang Aihua to hand over the money to him, but he felt that it was better to take it himself. First, with such a large sum of money, they would definitely not be willing to part with it, and even if they finally made up their minds to give it to him, they would dawdle for a long time. Chen Luo didn't have that kind of patience. Second, after all, it was several million yuan. If they were forced, these two people might jump the gun and use the money to hire someone to kill someone. Chen Luo was not afraid, but he didn't want to cause trouble at this critical moment over such a small amount of money. Chen Luo found 2303 and took out some wire from his bag and started to twist it around the keyhole. Even in 2019, the most heavily guarded places in the world, such as the Louvre, could not stop Chen Luo, and this ordinary security door was no different from being wide open in front of him. In less than 10 seconds, the lock on that door made a crisp opening sound. Chen Luo pushed the door open and closed it behind him. This was a duplex apartment, with a floor area of nearly 300 square meters. Even in 2008, it was worth more than 2 million yuan, or almost 8,100 yuan per square meter. Chen Luo clearly remembered the property prices in Pengcheng 11 years later. This area would be connected to the subway in the future, and the price would at least increase tenfold. Chen Luo took a quick look around. The house was decorated in a luxurious manner, even surpassing those of five-star luxury hotels. These two people dared not spend money extravagantly in the open, and it was estimated that they had spent all their money secretly on this house. Chen Luo wasted no time, but quickly searched the room, trying to find a place to hide the money. However, after searching for a while, Chen Luo found nothing in all the places where large amounts of cash could be hidden. This is interesting. Chen Luo couldn't help but laugh. These two people are not stupid. They must have considered that they would not be living here for a long time and that there would be thieves coming in, so they hid the money extremely well. Chen Luo just thought about it for a moment and started looking again. For Chen Luo, who had once played the urban thief, as long as the money was in this house, it was just a matter of time before he found it. Chapter 26, Going to School with Cash on Your Back. Over 2 million in cash. If you just stack it up, it can be 2 meters high. The amount is not small, and it would take a lot of space to hide it. With this line of thinking, Chen Luo's search was very simple, and he soon knew what he was looking for, which was a secret room. The house had just been renovated, and he was afraid that when it was being renovated, Wang Aihua and LV Li had someone add a secret room. Without much thought, Chen Luo went to the master bedroom first. Those two people were extremely greedy, otherwise they wouldn't have caused a death over it. From Chen Luo's understanding of human nature, the biggest possibility was that they would keep the money where they slept. Being able to feel the money close by would give them a sense of security. Chen Luo carefully looked around the 50 to 60 square meter master bedroom and quickly found a clue. The wall at the head of the bed was at an angle to the floor, which would not have been noticed if one did not look closely. That was because the steel reinforcement of the secret room had caused an overload, which had caused the surrounding floor to sink slightly, creating an angle of 1 to 5 degrees. Chen Luo smiled, walked over to the wall, looked around, and then fixed his gaze on the bedside table. He reached behind the bedside table and felt around, quickly finding a protrusion that looked like a switch. When Chen Luo pressed the switch, a crisp sound came, and the wall slowly retracted inward, revealing a secret room. Chen Luo smiled, and immediately lifted his foot and walked in. Inside were 2 huge safes, each 1.5 meters high. Chen Luo was not at all surprised. He walked over unhurriedly and squatted down to observe the safes. This is a safe with a combination of a dial combination and a key. It requires both the dial combination and the corresponding key to open, so the security factor is extremely high. But for Chen Luo, it was just like it was completely unguarded. He first turned the dial a few times to distinguish the sound coming from inside. After several trial and errors, Chen Luo had a general idea. He immediately reached in and started turning it, and in less than a minute, he heard the safe give a crisp unlocking sound. Chen Luo took out some wire and pried at the lock a few times, then took out a screwdriver and pried at the lock hole, and the entire safe door opened with a loud noise. What appeared before Chen Luo's eyes was a stack of red banknotes, filling the entire safe from top to bottom. At a rough glance, there were at least 1 million. Chen Luo was also unceremonious, and placed the school bag behind him under the safe, and pushed all the banknotes inside. After the school bag was full, Chen Luo did not open a second safe. Firstly, he knew that his school bag could not hold any more. Secondly, if he took all the money, the two men would definitely go crazy, and that would cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. Moreover, with more than 1 million yuan, Chen Luo could already do a lot of things, so it wasn't a big deal to part with that much money.
Chen Luo didn't linger, and immediately left Bifang Garden.
He didn't take the money to the bank to deposit it either, but instead walked proudly to school with more than 1 million yuan on his back. Chen Luo didn't want to deposit it, but knew that doing so directly would cause a lot of trouble. He was a student-looking person, and if he suddenly went to the bank with 1 million yuan, the bank staff would think there was an issue, unless they were stupid. If he reported it to the police, there would be big trouble. So before Chen Luo gets legitimate income, he will only deposit a portion of it into his card, and will not rashly deposit it all into the bank. By the time Chen Luo arrived at school, morning study had already begun. Wang Aihua was greeting the class at this time, but he looked distracted the whole time. Wang Aihua hadn't slept well the night before because of Chen Luo's words, and when he rushed over early the next day, he wanted to talk to Chen Luo to find out how much he knew. However, the other party didn't even show up. This made Wang Aihua feel a little panicked, and he couldn't help but start to daydream. Late? Did that kid go and call the police? What if the police came? Wang Aihua wasn't afraid of Chen Luo asking for a favor, but he was most afraid of Chen Luo going to the police. Just as he was hesitating whether to give Chen Luo's parents a call to sound them out, he saw Chen Luo walk in carrying his school bag. Wang Aihua was taken aback for a moment, and an inexplicable anger welled up in his heart. Chen Luo. The sound of reading in the classroom suddenly stopped, and it became so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. The students' gazes all turned towards the door of the classroom. Chen Luo glanced at Wang Aihua nonchalantly and said indifferently, "Teacher Wang, is there something the matter?" Wang Aihua's expression of fierce anger immediately subsided when he saw Chen Luo's indifferent gaze. He wanted to scold him, but his words got stuck in his throat, and then he stuttered, "You, come with me." The students in the classroom were stunned, because they thought Wang Aihua was going to lose his temper, but it suddenly turned into a tone of discussion that was almost pleading. At this time, even if they are slow to react, they know that Wang Aihua is afraid that Chen Luo really has something on him, otherwise his attitude towards Chen Luo would never have changed 180 degrees. What's more, the students were even more surprised by Chen Luo's change. Although it was only a short period of time, everyone sensed the huge change in Chen Luo. Chapter 27, A World of Difference. Chen Luo revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth, and without refusing, he immediately turned around and followed Wang Aihua out. Chen Luo knew that Wang Aihua would definitely come looking for him, and there was no avoiding it. It was just as well to get it out in the open. Wang Aihua didn't dare to look for Chen Luo inside the teaching building to talk, but instead went directly to the center of the school playground. There was no one within 100 meters in any direction, and he wasn't afraid of being heard. "So, how did you know about that matter?" Wang Aihua had pondered for a long time on the way here, and after much thought, she went straight to the point. Chen Luo said indifferently, "If you don't want people to know, it's because you did it yourself." "Teacher Wang, don't worry about how I know." Chen Luo said this, regardless of Wang Aihua's expression, and put the school bag behind him in front of him, then unzipped it to reveal a pile of red banknotes inside. Wang Aihua's eyes suddenly widened. Chen Luo's school bag was packed full, and one didn't need to think to know that it should all be filled with money. Where did he get so much money? Wang Aihua suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Could this money not be his? Chen Luo seemed to have guessed what he was thinking, and smiled as he spoke. "You're right, this money is what I took from Bifang Garden." Upon hearing this, Wang Aihua's eyes almost shot fire out, and he instinctively reached out to grab the money back. Chen Luo reached out nonchalantly and pinched Wang Aihua's arm, and with a smile that looked like it wasn't, he said, "Teacher Wang, this money is my hush money, are you sure you want it back?" Wang Aihua's heart trembled, and the anger in his eyes instantly subsided. He looked at Chen Luo in disbelief. "How did you get in there and get this money?" Wang Aihua's heart was bleeding. He only glanced at it and knew that there was at least more than 1 million yuan in the bag. Although they had earned more than 5 million yuan, anyone would feel heartbroken to have 1 million yuan taken away by Chen Luo like this. But at this moment, it was in Chen Luo's hands, and no matter how unwilling he was, he had to accept it. "Since I can know what Teacher Wang in finance Manager Lu did, compared to Bai Fanjiwan, it shouldn't be considered a big deal, right?" Chen Luo naturally didn't bother to explain to Wang Aihua, and he knew very well that the more he didn't explain, the more Wang Aihua would be unable to figure out his true intentions and the more afraid he would be of doing anything rash. Sure enough, Wang Aihua's expression changed slightly, and he looked at Chen Luo for a moment, not knowing what to say in response. Before yesterday, Chen Luo was someone Wang Aihua wouldn't even look at, but since last night, he had been unable to read Chen Luo. His entire temperament and character have undergone a radical change, and the Chen Luo in front of him is no longer the timid and cowardly student in front of him. It is obvious that he is his student, but in the face of his teacher, Chen Luo exudes a condescending arrogance. The fierce gaze and indifferent smile actually made Wang Aihua feel a little breathless. You can take this money, but I need to know how you found out about that incident, and whether you or anyone else will ever threaten us with it again.
Wang Aihua was a little flustered, but she didn't lose her head.
At this juncture, she still wanted to find out the reason.
Chen Luo gave a slight smile.
I won't tell you the reason, but I can tell you that no one else knows about this, and I won't threaten you with it again. From now on, you can go your own way and I can go mine, and we will never interfere with each other's business.
Wang Aihua's face clearly showed doubt, and he obviously didn't believe that Chen Luo would give up.
Chen Luo had excellent powers of observation, and just by noticing Wang Aihua's expression, he could guess what the guy was thinking. First, if I really were that greedy, I wouldn't just take this 1 million, I would take all the money in the other safe. Chen Luo pointed to the school bag in front of him, then zipped it up again and carried it behind his back.
Wang Aihua's expression slightly changed, because Chen Luo's words made sense.
If he really wanted more money, he could have taken all the money from Bai Fanjuan and not told Wang Aihua and the others. At most, they would suspect that a thief had taken it, and they would not suspect Chen Luo.
Second, isn't your distant cousin hanging out on Hualong District Street? If I ever threaten you for money again, you can just ask him to deal with me. I'm just a student, how could I possibly be a match for those people on the street? Teacher Wang, I'm sure you considered this solution last night, didn't you?
As soon as Chen Luo brought up this second point, Wang Aihua was suddenly shocked, because Chen Luo had really guessed it right. He did think of many ways last night, and finding a distant cousin was one of his backup options, but he didn't expect Chen Luo to figure it out.
Wang Aihua was truly shocked and frightened at this point.
He felt that Chen Luo had him completely figured out, and no matter what he did, it seemed like the other party could predict it. What shocked Wang Aihua even more was that he didn't even tell his wife and Elvili about his distant cousin's involvement in the underworld because he felt a bit ashamed.
How did Chen Luo know? Chapter 28, You Speak Latin? Chen Luo could know because of news reports in the future.
When Wang Aihua and Luli turned against each other, it was that distant cousin he spent 300,000 yuan to find who killed Luli. This is also the reason why Chen Luo has reservations. If Wang Aihua is pushed too far, he could really do something like hiring someone to kill someone. Chen Luo was not afraid, but there was so much he needed to do in the next 2 months that he didn't have any spare energy to waste on Wang Aihua. Third, I have no evidence of that incident, so at most I can report it to the school or the police. You can just return the money and find a way to get rid of the transfer record, and then you can rest assured. LV Finance is the head of the school's finance department, and he has ways to solve this matter, so I don't need to teach you.
Wang Aihua was stunned again, because what Chen Luo said was exactly what Elvili was about to do. Wang Aihua felt a chill down his spine.
Chen Luo not only knew that he was planning to hire his distant cousin, but now he had even deduced what Elvili was doing.
This was downright spooky.
While Wang Aihua was shocked, he was also relieved, because Chen Luo had methodically laid out these 3 points, which had indeed dispelled many of his doubts. Chen Luo noticed the change in Wang Aihua's expression and continued in a light tone, Teacher Wang should be able to rest assured now, so I have one more condition.
Wang Aihua's heart, which had just let go, suddenly hung in the balance again. What else do you want to do?
Chen Luo laughed, patted Wang Aihua on the shoulder, and said, Don't worry, it's not a big deal.
I've been busy lately and may not come to school often.
In case other teachers or my parents ask, I need your help.
Wang Aihua let out a small sigh of relief.
Compared to other matters, this really wasn't a big deal. When other teachers ask, just say that Chen Luo needs to go to the hospital frequently for medical reasons.
Okay, I understand.
Wang Aihua agreed at once, completely ignoring the fact that Chen Luo had just patted him on the shoulder, as if he were giving an order to a subordinate.
Chen Luo nodded, ignoring Wang Aihua's reaction, and turned towards the classroom.
When he returned to the classroom, the sound of reading inside the classroom was like pressing the mute button, and once again it became silent.
All the students in the class, except Gu Qinghuan, gave Chen Luo a stare.
Most of the students' eyes were full of surprise, except for Niao Wei, who had been lectured by Chen Luo last night. Those students' eyes were full of hatred.
Chen Luo ignored these stares and never took these little brats seriously.
From the moment he entered the classroom, there was only one person in his eyes from beginning to end. After Chen Luo arrived at his seat, he casually threw his school bag at his feet, and then noticed the book that Gu Qinghuan was holding in her hands. Chen Luo's face showed some surprise, because what Gu Qinghuan was holding was not a textbook, but a foreign language book, and it wasn't an English book either. Meditations, Meditations. Chen Luo looked at the title of the book and read it out loud. Gu Qinghuan had actually noticed that Chen Luo had entered a long time ago, but she quickly averted her gaze and focused on the book she was reading. But when Chen Luo read the name of her book, she turned back with a start and asked in surprise, "Vos can latine? Do you know Latin?" The class was at this point at its quietest. Although the two of them were not speaking loudly, their conversation was still heard clearly. But everyone heard it and couldn't understand a word they were saying. Chen Luo and Gu Qinghuan spoke as if they were speaking English, but their pronunciation was completely different from English, and they stared at them with wide eyes, as if they were listening to something from another world. Kia param, a little. Chen Luo laughed, a little surprised himself. If Gu Qinghuan read English books, he wouldn't be surprised, but Latin was not something that an average high school student would be interested in or learn. Latin is equivalent to European classical Chinese, and was used as the common language of diplomats and in written documents during the Middle Ages. It was very strong during the period when Europe was controlled by Catholicism. Many long-established universities in Europe still offer Latin courses, but only people in the history and literature departments will study it. So far, only the relatively conservative religious country of the Vatican is still using it, and it is no longer in its heyday. However, precisely because of this, Latin is now one of the languages that must be studied by those from prestigious European families, because it is one of the best ways for them to distinguish themselves from ordinary people, which has made it the so-called aristocratic language. The original Latin version of the Meditations that Gu Qinghuan was reading was also very famous. It was written by Marcus Aurelius, the only philosopher-emperor in Western history and one of the greatest emperors of the Roman Empire. Chen Luo didn't know that Gu Qinghuan's surprise was even greater than his. Although Chen Luo had only said a few words in Latin, his pronunciation was extremely pure, almost more standard than the person who had taught her Latin. Have vos leger librum hunc? Have you read this book? Gu Qinghuan, not believing in evil, asked in Latin again. This book embodies the two core ideas of the Stoic school: first, insisting on viewing everything in the universe from a holistic perspective, and second, living a life that is in line with nature and ideals. Chen Luo still spoke in Latin, and apart from Gu Qinghuan, all the students in the class looked confused. Chapter 29. This guy, what the hell? Gu Qinghuan was now certain that Chen Luo could really speak Latin, and from his pronunciation and proficiency, he had at least reached a level similar to a native speaker. Gu Qinghuan couldn't understand it. Although she had only transferred to the school at the beginning of the semester, she had heard people in the class mention that Chen Luo's academic performance had been at the bottom since the beginning of high school. Moreover, he was an immigrant, and his family was not well off, as could be judged from Chen Luo's usual temperament and dress. How could such a family let Chen Luo learn a foreign language, let alone Latin, when he was already learning English? Latin teachers were even harder to find than English teachers, because Latin was considered a minor language and there were far fewer people studying it. Even if they were found, the price was not affordable for a family like Chen Luo's. However, at this moment, Gu Qinghuan noticed the strange situation in the class. All the students in the class stared at them with surprise. Gu Qinghuan didn't like this feeling, so instead of continuing to converse with Chen Luo in Latin, she returned his gaze expressionlessly and continued reading the Meditations. Chen Luo smiled and didn't continue to talk to Gu Qinghuan. Instead, he took out his chemistry textbooks from his desk, from his first year to his third year of high school, and quickly skimmed through them. Although he didn't know much about Gu Qinghuan, he knew that she wasn't someone who liked to be the center of attention. This was reflected in her academic performance. In his previous life, although Gu Qinghuan and he were only classmates for a short period of 3 months, her grades were very strange every time there was a monthly exam. Even for subjects like Chinese, which had subjective essay scoring, her grades fluctuated around 120 points for all subjects, and she was always in the upper middle of the class. Chen Luo didn't think about it at first, but then he understood that this was clearly the result of Gu Qinghuan deliberately controlling her grades. She knew the answers to those questions, but she just didn't want to get too high a score and attract attention. Chen Luo also planned to spend some time improving her grades, not for any other reason than to see her parents smile. In her previous life, her parents had worried about her grades and she had been unable to hold her head up in front of relatives and friends. They had almost given up hope, and whether it was a bachelor's degree or a junior college degree, they just wanted her to get into college. Chen Luo took out his chemistry textbook from his first year of high school and scanned the pages with his eyes. It only took a few seconds to quickly scan the first page, and then he went on to the second page. Speed reading and speed writing were the first skills Chen Luo learned, and they were the foundation for countless other skills and knowledge. After thousands of years of practice, memorizing after just one glance was a piece of cake for Chen Luo. If he wanted, he could even recite it backwards after just one glance, and it would be perfect. Chen Luo chose science in high school, and for someone who has won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, biology, and physics, it is actually as easy as a college student doing a kindergarten topic. With a huge knowledge system in his mind as a foundation, Chen Luo spent less than 10 minutes going through all the chemistry textbooks from his 3 years of high school. After Chen Luo finished, he didn't stop, but instead took out all the textbooks for the remaining subjects and started flipping through them. At this point, Chen Luo's reading speed could no longer be described as looking, but rather as flipping. He flipped faster and faster, and to onlookers, it didn't even look like he was reading, but rather like he was putting on a show. At that speed, a normal person simply couldn't read the content on the page. The students in the classroom had originally withdrawn their attention after Chen Luo and Gu Qinghuan stopped talking. Ability to make fake documents when entering and exiting the residence, hacking into the residence's database to add his own data, and cracking security devices. However, the most important of these abilities is actually disguise. Chen Luo has also mastered the skill of disguise to the max level. Not only can he turn an ugly person into a beautiful person, he can also turn a man into a woman or a woman into a man without any issues. When he entered the official residence, he even disguised himself as a Caucasian and no one noticed. Therefore, even though he was wanted by more than 70 countries, no one knew Chen Luo's real appearance. The reason why he was discovered later was that Chen Luo was careless and underestimated the US government's determination to capture him. When Chen Luo sold the portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the black market, he discovered that the US government had long been closely monitoring all black markets. As soon as the portrait of Lincoln appeared on the black market, the US FBI found a clue, followed the trail to find Chen Luo, and exposed his appearance. Although Chen Luo was able to escape in the end, he was unable to return to his country through normal channels. Because the FBI knew that Chen Luo was proficient in disguise, they conducted meticulous checks on everyone who wanted to leave the country, from beginning to end, to confirm their identity and that they were not in disguise, before allowing them to leave. The reason Chen Luo rented this house was actually to facilitate the placement of some props and costumes. Because his mother Li Yun would help him clean his room every few days, if she saw all that cash and the weird props and costumes, she would be shocked. Chen Luo was going to disguise himself to meet the 3 big bosses who had been selected. If he went as a student, he would not only be unconvincing, but he was afraid that he would not even be able to get in the door. Chen Luo did not go right away, but decided to get to know Xie Luyun, who was 18 years old. Chen Luo knew that she attended a prestigious private school, which was also known as the legendary aristocratic school. Most of the children who could get in were from wealthy families. At this time, Xie Luyun had already received a full scholarship to Harvard, and she didn't even need to take the college entrance exam, she could just go to Harvard next year. It was very easy for Chen Luo to get to know Xie Luyun. She would tell him about the things that happened in high school and the things she usually did. At this time, Xie Luyun's favorite thing to do was speed racing. Xie Luyun's biggest hobby in high school was collecting sports cars, which was naturally not an affordable hobby for ordinary people. But for Xie Luyun, this was not an issue at all. When she was in junior high school, she began to learn about stocks, futures, and other financial matters. During the summer vacation of her junior high school year, she already started to learn about business management at the financial company owned by her father. At the end of the summer vacation, Xie Luyun used the money she had earned to buy her first supercar. Then, in her second year of high school, she received an offer of admission to Harvard University, and Xie Yuan and her father Xie Xin each rewarded her with a supercar. On her 18th birthday, in addition to receiving 30 million yuan from the family trust fund, Xie Luyun also received birthday gifts from several elders in the family, and all of them were sports cars. Counting the money Xie Luyun earned from her own investments in the past 2 years, Xie Luyun had more than 20 supercars under her name when she was 18 years old, and she drove a different one every day for a month. Chen Luo couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion in his heart when he heard this. This is the difference between those in the upper echelons of society and ordinary people. Others are on the finishing line from birth, playing with different things and following completely different life trajectories. For example, Chen Luo in his previous life was bullied in high school to the point of wanting to commit suicide, and by the time he was 30, he was still a failure. But Xie Luyun earned his own sports car at the age of 16, and by the time he was 29, he had become the president of a listed real estate company. This is the so-called legend, not afraid of others being born better than you, but afraid of being born better than you, but working harder than you. With so many sports cars, Xie Luyun naturally doesn't keep them at home gathering dust, but likes to drive them out and race.
Pengcheng has many mountains.
At the southernmost tip is a mountain called Nanyuan Mountain. This is not a famous scenic area, so few people go here. But this is the favorite place for car racing gangs, because there is a very dangerous winding mountain road here, and there are very few vehicles even during the day. At night when it's quiet, there are even fewer people, and it becomes a popular place for bikers to race. Xie Luyun loved to race, and whenever he had some free time, he would go to Nanyuan Mountain to race, and usually bet on something. Li Zixuan had also tracked down Xie Luyun at that time, and kidnapped her on Nanyuan Mountain. Chen Luo pondered for a moment, then immediately took out his mobile phone and quickly dialed a number.
Fat monkey? Who is this?
There was a surprised sound on the other end of the line, because the caller ID showed a completely unfamiliar number. Although Fat Monkey had many mobile phone numbers, the one Chen Luo was calling now was a private number that very few people knew about, and it was generally only given to clients or big shots who were extremely important to him.
Chapter 33, Who I am is none of your business. Who I am is none of your business. I need a Yamaha Raptor.
If I don't see it within a week, I'll demolish your lair.
Fat Monkey was taken aback.
If Chen Lu had dialed another number and spoken so arrogantly, he would have immediately stormed out and cursed. But now he dared not, because Chen Lu's tone and voice were full of a condescending meaning, as if he were in the clouds.
This tone and intonation, Fat Monkey had only heard from the mouths of those important customers.
And although Chen Lu had only said a few words, it had revealed that he knew him very well. The Yamaha Raptor is a custom heavy motorcycle produced by Yamaha, and it will not be available until next year. To get it now, the average person simply does not have the energy. And Fat Monkey is precisely the only person in the entire Pengcheng who is capable of getting this car early, because he is in the smuggling business and has his own smuggling networks in Hong Kong, Europe, and the United States.
His biggest customers are the second generation of those wealthy families.
In 2008, foreign sports cars and some novelty gadgets generally would not be released in the country for a long time. The young masters of those wealthy families usually don't have much patience and often pay several times, or even dozens of times, the price to find someone like Fat Monkey to ship things in advance. Chen Lu knew that Fat Monkey was also very simple, because he was one of the three big guys Chen Lu had written about.
This guy's real name was Ho Yaozong, a native of Pengcheng.
He started hanging out on the streets as a teenager and was arrested several times. After getting out, he followed his cousin and started a smuggling business. At first, he smuggled things from Hong Kong to Pengcheng, such as some electronic products. Ho Yaozong found this way of making money too slow, so he started taking on jobs for the rich and powerful, because often taking on just one of their orders was enough to feed him for a year.
Ho Yaozong's accumulation of wealth also began at this time.
Later, the smuggling business grew bigger and bigger, and he successfully laundered his money, becoming the boss of several trading companies and worth billions. Chen Lu was very familiar with Ho Yaozong in 2019, but they only used their relationship to get what they needed from each other. For example, the sniper rifle was brought back to China through his channels at the time. Ho Yaozong didn't know how to address Chen Luo, but he said in an extremely respectful tone, "Sir, I can try to get the Yamaha, but the bike needs to be customized, and a week is simply." Chen Luo coldly interrupted Ho Yaozong, impatiently saying, "I know that kid Xie Hongfei asked you to customize another one, and it will arrive before the National Day.
Give me that one." Ho Yaozong's expression changed on the other end of the phone.
Xie Hongfei is Xie Liuyun's cousin, and he had already obtained a custom-made Tyrannosaurus from him earlier. It seems that he thinks this motorcycle is good, and he has ordered another one from Ho Yaozong.
Chen Luo knew that this was not surprising, but knowing when his goods would arrive was a bit unbelievable. Because of this kind of thing, Ho Yaozong could not possibly go around bragging about it, only he and a few trusted people knew about it. Are there spies among those trusted people? However, Ho Yaozong knew that this was not the time to worry about such things. The young master in front of him had not hung up yet. If he angered Chen Lu, who knew if he would really come and smash his own lair in a rage. Ho Yaozong had already assumed that Chen Lu was the young master of some wealthy family. Otherwise, the other party would not have spoken so contemptuously when mentioning Xie Xiaojie, and would also have known that Xie Xiaojie had ordered a second Tyrannosaurus here. Such a person's background could not be worse than Xie Xiaojie's. However, after going through the major families in Pengcheng in his mind, Ho Yaozong was unable to place Chen Lu with any of them for the time being. "I really can't decide for this young master. You know how the young master is. If there isn't a reasonable explanation, he will definitely break my legs.
I don't care how you explain to Xia Hongfei, but if I don't see that Tyrannosaurus before the national day, it won't be just breaking one of your legs. Chen Luo's voice was indifferent, but it was full of an unyielding tone.
Ho Yaozong secretly groaned inwardly. The threatening undertone in Chen Luo's tone was self-evident. If he didn't give him the Tyrannosaurus, he might break both his legs or even lose his life. This is fucking like roasting him over a fire. Of course, I won't let you suffer. Before National Day, the customs and police will jointly conduct a special anti-smuggling operation in the harbor area. You should know what to do.
Chen Luo said this matter-of-factly and then hung up.
The Haigang district is an administrative district of Pengchang by the sea and is the most important area for smuggling ashore. Ho Yaozong's lair is located near Longkou Port in the Haigang district.
Chen Luo knew in advance, and in fact, Ho Yaozong told him during a casual conversation. During the 2008 National Day, Ho Yaozong avoided this special crackdown because a few days before the customs operation, he discovered that one of his men was a police informant. After killing the informant in a rage, Ho Yaozong immediately transferred all goods and manpower in the harbor district, avoiding this fatal blow. Chen Luo hung up after saying this, knowing that the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. Hanging up now would not only maintain his sense of mystery and power, but also give Ho Yaozong enough time to fill in the blanks.
Chapter 34, Something Happened at Home.
Ho Yaozong on the other end of the phone was really stunned, and he didn't react for a long time after the phone disconnected. If someone else had said this, Ho Yaozong would not have taken it seriously at all, because in his line of work, it is impossible to not have any connections.
Without some under-the-table dealings, you won't even know how you'll die. However, Ho Yaozong has not heard anything about this special action that Chen Luo mentioned.
Ho Yaozong's expression changed several times, and the first thing he did was flip to a number on his phone and dial it.
Leader, have you heard anything recently? What do you mean? Don't worry, if there was really something, I wouldn't have failed to notify you. Are you sure? Don't jump to conclusions. Okay, I'm busy right now, we'll talk next time.
Before Ho Yaozong could react, the other party hung up directly.
Ho Yaozong's face instantly turned extremely ugly, because he had already sensed something was wrong.
The other party hadn't even thought about what to say when answering him, and it was obvious that they had already thought of a response. What he said to reassure him was most likely a ploy to stall him.
Ho Yaozong narrowed his eyes.
He immediately took out his phone and dialed another number. Rat, go to Coal Garden right away and see if that little lover of his is still there.
Yes, boss. Less than an hour later, Ho Yaozong's phone rang again. Boss, that woman is no longer here. I checked the surveillance cameras in the house and she packed her things and left 3 days ago. Ho Yaozong's veins bulged, and he almost crushed the phone in his hand. He gritted his teeth and said, I know.
Immediately notify the brothers and transfer all the goods out.
What? Boss, is something wrong? Don't fucking bullshit, just do it now. Yes, yes, yes. After hearing Ho Yaozong's angry rant, where would the mouse dare to bullshit, and he hurriedly took the order and went to do it. Fucking shit.
After Ho Yaozong hung up the phone, he couldn't hold back his anger and smashed the phone onto the ground, smashing it to pieces.
Ho Yaozong's anger was not without reason.
He had offered a lot of money to the leader on a regular basis, and had even supported the other man's mistress. Not only had he bought the mistress a house, but the money he had offered had also been given directly to the mistress. Ho Yaozong knew that the leader did not dare to take the money directly, for fear of leaving evidence, so he deliberately collected the money through the mistress.
But Ho Yaozong is not stupid.
When buying that house, he kept one eye open and installed a surveillance camera in the house. He wanted to capture video evidence of the leader and his lover meeting in case of an emergency. Now it seems that the move he made back then was really useful.
You son of a bitch. If you want me dead, I'll send you to the 18th level of hell. Ho Yaozong.
The value of the goods at Longkou Port alone was nearly 50 million yuan. If you include the goods smuggled before, the total must have exceeded 100 million yuan. In 2008, such a huge amount of money was punishable by death. It was not until the Criminal Law Amendment Act was passed in 2011 that the death penalty for ordinary smuggling was abolished. At this point, Ho Yaozong knew for sure that the other party must have known that the authorities were serious and that he could no longer be saved. So he decisively abandoned Ho Yaozong and completely severed the connection. After all, the money he paid did not even go through his hands, and all he had to do was send his mistress away. After Ho Yaozong's anger subsided, he suddenly felt the vest getting cold, and then he realized that he had been scared into a cold sweat.
At this moment, Ho Yaozong's awe and gratitude for Chen Luo reached an unparalleled level.
That leader was considered a number one figure, and he couldn't even protect himself, not to mention leaking a single bit of news. However, Chen Luo casually told him the news. For Chen Luo, it might not be a big deal, but for Ho Yaozong, it was simply a life-saving grace. Even Chen Luo, who kept such strictly confidential news, could know about it, which undoubtedly showed his high status. Apart from the children of those big families, Ho Yaozong really couldn't think of anyone else who had such power.
Ho Yaozong naturally knew to whom the Tyrannosaurus Rex belonged after thinking about it. Xie Daxiao already had one, so he wasn't in a hurry. He could still urge the United States to send another one urgently, and at worst, he would just have to pay a few times more. Compared to his own life, this was nothing at all, and he could also ingratiate himself with Chen Luo, the mysterious young master. Ho Yaozong picked up his phone and wanted to call Chen Luo to thank him, but when he thought about the other person's identity, he put the phone down again. A big shot like this wouldn't need his thanks.
Ho Yaozong could only wait for Chen Luo to contact him on his own initiative, or wait until the Tyrannosaurus arrived and fulfill Chen Luo's request. While Ho Yaozong was filling in the blanks in his own mind, Chen Luo was about to go to school when he received a call from his mother, Li Yun. "Luo, the water pipe at home has burst and the house is flooded.
You can't live there now. Go to your aunt's house to sleep tonight after self-study. I've already spoken to your aunt." Chen Luo's pupils suddenly contracted. He sensed something was wrong as soon as he heard his mother's tone of voice. When Li Yun spoke, her tone of voice revealed a sense of exhaustion and panic, completely different from her usual tone of voice.
Something's happened at home. Chapter 35, Against the Law. Chen Luo did not expose Li Yun, but smiled and said, "Mom, I know, I'll go to my aunt's house tonight." "Well, if it's really late, you can find a small hotel near the school to stay for the night, and the house will be cleaned up tomorrow."
"Well, Mom, I have to go to class, I'll hang up."
Okay, go quickly." Chen Luo hung up the phone, his eyes flashing with cold light. Although he didn't know what had happened, Li Yun obviously knew that the situation at home was not good, as she had not let him go home. His parents knew very well that Chen Luo had already entered the countdown to the college entrance examination, and they did not want him to worry or let anything affect his college entrance examination. Chen Luo immediately took out the makeup props and began to quickly change his appearance. In less than half an hour, Chen Luo's entire image had changed. He had now disguised himself to look like a man in his early 30s. When he changed into the 20,000 yuan suit, Chen Luo's temperament changed instantly, exuding the aura of a successful businessperson. Chen Luo looked in the mirror to make sure he couldn't see his own reflection, and then immediately turned and left the room, rushing towards Hualong Market. When he arrived at Hualong Market, it was already past 5 p.m. At this time of day, it was already past dinner time, and there would be a lot of people buying food in the market. However, when Chen Luo arrived at his own vegetable stall, he found that not only was it closed, but the outside was also in a mess. From the traces outside, Chen Luo could tell at a glance that it had been vandalized, and he even saw some bloodstains on the ground. Chen Luo's heart sank slightly. He was a little worried that it was his parents. But Chen Luo took a deep breath and quickly calmed down. Judging from his mother's tone, nothing major had happened. Chen Luo's eyes flashed. He walked over to the vegetable stall next door and asked, pretending to be curious, "Boss, I come here every day to buy vegetables. Why is their shop closed today?" The boss actually knew Chen Luo, because Chen Luo often came to help out when he was on vacation. However, after Chen Luo disguised himself, the boss simply didn't recognize him and didn't think in that direction. The vegetable stall owner sighed and said, "Forget it, they don't know who they offended." A group of bikers just arrived wearing helmets, rushed in with iron bars and smashed everything. The boss was accidentally injured and is now in the hospital. The boss's wife called the police and then went with the police to make a statement. The vegetable stall owner stopped suddenly after saying this, looking at Chen Luo with some fear. Just when he was in the middle of speaking, he inexplicably felt his body suddenly stiffen. Before he understood what was going on, he saw Chen Luo's eyes as if they could glow, emitting an extremely cold light. The vegetable stall owner's mind was in a state of shock. The light was extremely cold, like that of some kind of fierce beast, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. "Is the boss's injury serious?" The vegetable stall owner was shocked, and in a reflexive manner, he answered, "I don't think it's serious. I was just blocking those people when I got hit with a stick in my arm." Chen Luo let out a sigh of relief, turned his head, and left Hualong Market. His eyes flashed as he began to think quickly. It couldn't be a coincidence that something bad happened at home every night, but not a single thing happened the day after he came back to life. In just a moment, Chen Luo had already targeted Wang Aihua and Nie Wei.
However, Chen Luo quickly ruled out Wang Aihua.
Although 1 million was a figure that made him feel extremely distressed, Wang Aihua had something on him, and doing so would not do him any good, but would instead anger Chen Luo. Even if Wang Aihua was a fool, he would not be foolish to this extent.
The only remaining possibility was Nie Wei.
Chen Luo thought of the words Nie Wei said to him, "Your revenge starts today, get ready to enjoy it." Chen Luo thought at the time that he was just bluffing and saying it casually, but he never imagined that that idiot would actually order someone to go after his parents. Nie Wei was also perfectly capable of doing this. Nie Jiming knew people from all walks of life, and it would be easy for him to find a few thugs to smash up a food stall. And they were not afraid of calling the police.
The bikers all wore helmets, so they couldn't be seen.
Unlike nowadays, when there are cameras everywhere, they smashed the stall and rode off on their motorcycles. The police would never catch anyone, and in the end, nothing would happen.
Since you want to die, I'll grant your wish. Chen Luo's murderous intent skyrocketed.
If Nie Wei had come after him, Chen Luo wouldn't even be angry, but if he dared to touch his parents, that would be crossing Chen Luo's line. Chen Luo returned to the rented house and opened the computer, whereupon his fingers flew across the keyboard. In less than a moment, a surveillance screen appeared on his computer. Chen Luo had lived in Hualong Market for 2 years and knew that although there was no surveillance inside the market, there was at the entrance. What Chen Luo was hacking into was precisely the surveillance of the Hualong Market Management Office. He had to first find the group of bikers. First, they must be punished as they deserved, and second, he had to determine who was behind it all.
Chapter 36, The Green Dragon Bikers.
The system at Hualong Market Management is no different from an unguarded door for someone like Chen Luo, who can hack into any computer in the world.
It only took Chen Luo a few minutes to retrieve the surveillance footage from the entrance and find the footage of the bikers leaving. Chen Luo pressed pause and kept narrowing the view until he could see clearly.
There were a total of 3 motorcycles in the group of bikers, all Suzuki heavy motorcycles, with 2 people on each motorcycle. However, the surveillance cameras of this era were generally not good, the resolution was too low, and since the 2 people were wearing helmets and were facing away from the camera, there was no way to see their faces clearly. Chen Luo did not give up, however, and continued to stare at the surveillance footage, observing other details. Although it was not clear what these bikers looked like, and each one dressed differently, they all had one thing in common: tattoos on their arms. However, not only were the tattoos very blurry, but they were only partially captured on the surveillance footage, so it was impossible to tell what they were.
Chen Luo took a pen and paper from a drawer and drew the 6 tattoos he saw.
Chen Luo's drawing ability is already at a master level, and copying a few tattoos is naturally no problem.
It's like direct copy and paste, transferring the tattoos on the screen to the paper.
Although the tattoos are blurry, Chen Luo stared at these tattoo fragments for a while, picked up the pen in his hand and began to complete the tattoos. Tattoos in paintings have something in common, because the first thing to do in the tattooing process is to review the drawing. The so-called review of the drawing is to observe the structure, tone and spatial order of the pattern, which is equivalent to the observation and finalization in painting. Chen Luo is proficient in painting, and the derivation of the lines and textures of the tattoo is not too difficult for him. He just looked at it and knew which way the lines behind these fragments should go. Moreover, although each of these tattoos was photographed in a different place, it can be inferred from the structure and tone that these 6 people have obviously got the same tattoo. 6 fragments, plus Chen Luo's deduction, in less than a moment, he drew a complete tattoo pattern. Unsurprisingly, these bikers had no originality and tattooed a dragon. Chen Luo compared the complete dragon tattoo with the other 5 fragments, and they all matched without exception. Chen Luo sneered, immediately took out his phone and dialed Ho Yaozong's phone number again.
"Hello, this is Ho Yaozong."
Ho Yaozong had just saved Chen Luo's number, and now that he saw him calling, he immediately got a shock and hastily answered the phone, then asked in an incredibly respectful tone, "I wonder what your name is, sir?"
"My surname is Chen." "Hello, Mr. Chen."
Ho Yaozong quickly ran through his mind, but found that there were no large Chen families in Pengcheng.
However, this did not prevent Ho Yaozong from continuing to believe that
Chen Luo was from a big family. China is such a big country, and at his level, he can only reach out to the big boys in Pengcheng at most, and it is impossible for him to recognize all the big boys in the country.
"I want to find a group of bikers. They ride heavy Suzukis with blue dragon tattoos on their arms. Have you heard of them?" Ho Yaozong also hangs out on the streets, but his level is much higher than the bikers.
Not to mention his men and funds, Ho Yaozong even has smuggled guns in his hands.
Ho Yaozong froze for a moment.
He thought Chen Luo was here to ask about the Yamaha Dragstar motorcycle, but he didn't expect to ask about a bunch of punks. However, Ho Yaozong quickly filled in the blanks himself. Chen Luo just asked him for a Dragstar, and now he immediately came to ask about punks riding heavy motorcycles, and his tone was cold. There was no doubt that the biker gang must have offended Chen Luo for some reason, perhaps it was the heavy motorcycle. Chen Luo was going to settle scores with these punks. However, Ho Yaozong didn't care about that. He quickly thought about it for a moment and immediately said, Pengcheng doesn't have many biker gangs. According to the characteristics you mentioned, it should be the Green Dragon Gang. Their leader gave himself the nickname Green Dragon, so everyone under him has a green dragon tattooed. Is their area of influence in Hualong district? Yes. Arrest all of their men and give me the address when you're done. Okay, Chen Xiao. Ho Yaozong agreed without even thinking. The Green Dragon biker gang were just a bunch of low-level punks, and Ho Yaozong didn't even need to get his hands dirty to deal with them. He just told his men to go and they would take care of it. After Chen Luo hung up the phone, Ho Yaozong even went so far as to take some of the men who were transferring goods to go directly to the Green Dragon biker gang's lair in order to prove his abilities. Ho Yaozong's men were outnumbered by the bikers, and since the attack was sudden, the bikers had no time to react and were quickly overpowered. All the bikers, including the Green Dragons, were captured. Chen Luo rushed to the location Ho Yaozong had notified him of, only to find it was by the beach. All the Green Dragon bikers were kneeling in a neat line with black hoods on their heads and their hands tied behind their backs. Chapter 37, All Sunk. Ho Yaozong knew from the first moment he saw Chen Luo that the person who had come was Chen Xiao. Although he had not seen Chen Luo before, one could intuitively tell a person's social class from their temperament, eyes, and gait. Chen Luo's attire aside, one could tell at a glance that it was an expensive suit. Although his pace was slow, he exuded an air of confidence that everything was under control. What made Ho Yaozong even more certain was that Chen Luo's piercing eyes seemed to be able to penetrate people's hearts. This was definitely not something that an ordinary person, or even an ordinary member of a wealthy family, could possess. This was the first time in his life that Ho Yaozong had seen someone with such a powerful and oppressive aura. Ho Yaozong's heart trembled, and he led the way to greet the person with a servile attitude. Hello, Mr. Chen. Ho Yaozong weighs over 200 pounds, and when he runs, he practically looks like a ball. When he got close to Chen Luo and bowed with a nod, he looked quite comical. The expressions of Ho Yaozong's subordinates all changed subtly, because it was the first time they had seen their boss act like a toady. It looked like he was about to kneel down and lick Chen Luo's shoes. They didn't dare to be negligent either, and hurriedly bowed with Ho Yaozong. Chen Luo waved his hand nonchalantly, glanced at Ho Yaozong, and said indifferently, How did you know it was me? Ho Yaozong was not 100% sure at first, but when he heard Chen Luo's voice, which was exactly the same as it had been on the phone, he was instantly certain. Ho Yaozong was beaming with a smile, the fat on his face shaking as he said, How could there be many people in the world who have the bearing of someone like you, Mr. Chen? Even if I were blind, I could recognize you. Chen Luo looked indifferent, and he didn't react at all to Ho Yaozong's flattery. He looked at the people kneeling on the beach and walked straight over to them. Ho Yaozong hurriedly followed behind, and when he reached the group of Qinglong speeding bikers, he pointed at the person kneeling in the front and said, Chen Xiao, this is their boss, Greenworm. Chen Luo didn't care about Ho Yaozong's nickname, and he walked up to Qinglong and reached out to remove the hood on Qinglong's head. This afternoon, who told you to go to Hualong Market and smash that vegetable stall? At this moment, Qinglong was trembling with fear. He had always thought that he had offended some big shot. But after thinking about it, he realized that he had not recently offended anyone he couldn't afford to offend. Although Qinglong was a small thug, he was not stupid and knew very well who he could and could not offend. When he heard Chen Luo ask this question, not only was Qinglong dumbfounded, even Ho Yaozong was stunned. Did all this happen because of smashing a vegetable stall? However, Ho Yaozong's expression quickly returned to normal. Many of these young masters of the rich and powerful had strange temperaments. Perhaps it was when these people smashed the vegetable stall that Chen Luo saw it, and simply because he didn't like the sight, he wanted to clean up these people. Ho Yaozong had seen a lot of these kinds of things, and even stranger things than this. For example, as he knew, there was once a young master who, when on the road, had a passerby glance at him and then smile a little, and in fact the person didn't mean any harm. But the young master was in a very bad mood at the time, and immediately ordered someone to beat the passerby half to death. I won't ask again. Chen Luo's indifferent tone made Qinglong jump in fright, and he hurriedly said, Yes, I sent someone. But. If I had known they knew you, I wouldn't have dared to do it, so please spare my life. As he spoke, Xinglong suddenly knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly to Chen Luo. As someone who hung out on the streets, Xinglong naturally knew Ho Yaozong and also knew what kind of place this was. When Ho Yaozong dealt with his enemies, he would take them to the beach, kill them, put their bodies in oil drums, and then transport them by his smuggling ship to the deep sea to sink. When Xinglong had his blindfold removed, he saw a neat row of oil drums on the beach. He was scared to death on the spot, and knew immediately what it meant. Very good, they're all sunk. Chen Luo confirmed his suspicions and, without any hesitation, said this and turned to leave. Ho Yaozong seemed not at all surprised by this, as if he had long expected Chen Luo to give this order. Ho Yaozong had long since become extremely proficient at this sort of thing. He immediately waved his hand at his subordinates, made a gesture, and hurriedly followed Chen Luo. Young Master Chen, spare my life. Young Master Chen, I'm still useful, I know about Nie Jining's weak points, and some things that he can't let anyone see. Xinglong was so scared that his spirit fled, and in his utmost fear, he slammed his head against the ground. Chen Luo suddenly paused, turned around, and walked back to Xinglong. He said indifferently, tell me. Whether you can live depends on whether what you say is interesting. Xinglong's head was bleeding, and the blood and sand were mixed together. Some got into his eyes, and some slid into his mouth, which was extremely uncomfortable. However, when he heard Chen Luo's voice, he suddenly felt as if he had grabbed a straw, and hurriedly began to tell the story of Nie Jiming. Chapter 38, Death penalty can be avoided, but living hell is hard to escape. Ho Yaozong and his gang had originally taken out knives and placed them at the necks of the dozen or so bikers, preparing to slash their necks. Naturally, the bikers had heard Chen Luo's orders and were scared out of their minds. They were all petty criminals, and the most they did in their daily lives was bully ordinary people, so they had never seen such a scene before. Some were so scared that they simply froze, while others were so scared that they wanted to struggle to escape, but they were kicked to the ground and couldn't get up for a long time. Some were so scared that they urinated themselves, and the smell of urine drifted out, making them look ridiculous. However, at this time, Ho Yaozong suddenly waved his hand, and his group of subordinates immediately withdrew their daggers and retreated again. Nie Jiming's son Nie Wei hit and killed someone while driving without a license. Yes, I asked one of my men to take the blame, and he gave me 500,000 yuan. Also, there was a mistress that Nie Jiming kept, who was looking for a young man on the side, and I was asked to go and break the young man's legs. His construction company owed a lot of migrant workers' wages, and when they gathered together to go to Nie Jiming to demand their wages, they also asked me to take people to beat them off. Chen Luo found it a bit interesting when he heard this. In order to save his life, Xinglong revealed everything that Nie Jiming had done, just like shaking out a sieve, but it got a bit boring towards the end. For example, Nie Jiming's wife, Lin Yun, also kept a few gigolos on the side, and Xinglong asked someone to keep an eye on them. Do you have any evidence for any of this? Green Dragon paused for a moment, and then hastily said, yes, there is. When he asked me to find someone to take the fall, although he gave me cash, the guy who took the fall is my sworn brother, and I can make him recant. And the guy whose leg was broken, he just guessed that Nie Jiming did it, but he doesn't know who it was, and he has no evidence. I can make the brothers who did it turn themselves in. Chen Luo suddenly waved his hand to interrupt Xinglong. Very good, you go to the police station right now and confess everything that Nie Jiming did. Xinglong felt overjoyed at hearing this. Those things were not big, but they were not small either. However, he would not be sentenced to death. If he took into account the fact that he had confessed, he would be out in 10 years at most. If he did not listen to Chen Luo, he would die right now. Everyone knows what to choose, as long as they are not stupid. Yes, as long as Qin Shao spares my life, I will immediately turn myself in. Chen Lu sneered coldly, the death penalty can be avoided, but the living punishment is hard to escape, one person will have a finger chopped off. After Chen Lu finished speaking, he looked at Ho Yaozong and said indifferently, you come with me. Ho Yaozong hurriedly nodded in response, and then shouted at the gang of subordinates, you heard what Qin Shao said, hurry up and do it. The gangsters standing behind the bikers immediately stepped forward, 2 people in each group, holding down their fingers and cutting them off without hesitation. Ah! Ah! The cries of pain rose one after the other, instantly echoing across the beach. Chen Luo turned a deaf ear, not even changing his expression in the slightest. Chen Xiao, just letting that worm go, he might just run away.
Should I send someone to keep an eye on him?
Ho Yaozong said carefully as he came up behind Chen Luo.
No need.
Whether he surrenders or not, Nie Zhiming will die. For Chen Luo, the moment he learned that it was Nie Zhiming who asked Qinglong to go and injure his father, he was already a dead man. Because regardless of whether Qinglong surrenders or not, Chen Luo intends to personally get rid of Nie Zhiming. In fact, he knew very well that what Qinglong had said would at most cause Nie Zhiming some trouble, and it was unlikely that he would even be sent to prison.
After hearing what Qinglong had said, Chen Luo quickly formed a plan in his mind, and he no longer needed the reptile Qinglong.
When Chen Luo said this, Ho Yaozong immediately understood what he meant, and he immediately shut up and dared not speak again.
My car will go back first, you can drop me off in the city. It would be my pleasure.
This way please. Ho Yaozong couldn't help but feel happy at the news, and immediately led the way attentively, before stopping in front of a BMW and opening the door for Chen Luo. In 2008, most of the cars on the streets of Pengcheng were
Volkswagen and Toyota.
Car sales were still dominated by family cars, and luxury cars were nowhere near as common as they would become in later generations. He went to the Longquan Hotel in Hualong District.
After Chen Luo got in the car, he shouted an order at the driver in front of the car, then turned to Ho Yaozong next to him and said with a calm face, "Have you ever thought about going ashore?" Ho Yaozong was stunned for a moment.
He had been making money through shady means for so many years, and although he had made a lot of money, he actually felt insecure deep down. He was also afraid that one day he would suddenly wake up and a bunch of police would break in and handcuff him. It wasn't that these people didn't want to go ashore, but they couldn't find a way to launder their money.
Xin Xiao, people like us have already been branded, and unless we leave Pengcheng and change our appearance, it will be difficult to go ashore. But if we leave Pengcheng, we will lose our roots. I'll teach you a way. Ho Yaozong was stunned, and immediately a feeling of ecstasy welled up in his heart.
Chen Luo was obviously going to teach him how to go ashore after laundering his money.
Chapter 39, You are a genius.
I am indebted to Chen Xiao for looking down on me, and in the future I will follow your lead.
Ho Yaozong did not mention whether Chen Luo could help him successfully go straight, but instead directly expressed his loyalty.
This is the cleverness of Ho Yaozong, because he guessed that Chen Luo was expressing his intention to recruit him, otherwise why would he teach him any methods? Chen Luo revealed a trace of a smile at the corner of his mouth, but he did not respond. He knew very well the nature of people like Ho Yaozong, who were mixed up in the underworld. Such people could only be won over with power and interests, and their expressions of loyalty could not be taken seriously. Ho Yaozong had now filled his own mind with the image of being the young master of some powerful family, and coupled with the information he had given, which had saved his life, naturally he was willing to obey. But if he knew that beneath this face was just a high school student, I'm afraid someone would have chopped him up by now. The method is not troublesome. Since you and your cousin have connections in Hong Kong, registering in the Hong Kong household register should not be a big issue for you. Open a formal company in Hong Kong, operate it properly for a period of time, and then return to Pengcheng as a Hong Kong person investing in the mainland. You speak Cantonese, so by then lose this fat, and pretend to be a Hong Kong local tyrant. Who would recognize you? In fact, the most troublesome thing is the money in your hands. That money is all black money. If you don't find a way to launder it, it will just rot in your hands. Ho Yaozong froze for a moment. He actually knew the method Chen Luo was talking about, and it wasn't troublesome to operate the rest either. But as Chen Luo said, the money in his hands was all black money, and there was simply no way to transfer it out through normal channels. And he didn't dare to put too much capital in the bank either, because the numbers were too large, and if he wasn't careful, it would trigger the bank's anti-money laundering warning. As soon as the police investigate, it's all over. Ho Yaozong smuggles mostly cash these days, either to buy property or to be deposited in the bank in small amounts through different ID cards. This is extremely troublesome, and when a large sum of money is needed, it takes a long time to gather the funds.
Do you know online games?
Ho Yaozong's face was full of shock, because Chen Luo's thinking was so jumpy that he could hardly keep up.
I know a little bit.
I played Legend of Heroes back in the early years. In 2008, the computer penetration rate was not too high, less than 20% nationwide, and even in economically developed cities like Pengcheng,
it was only between 30% and 40%. Ho Yaozong was nearly 40 years old and actually didn't know how to use a computer very well. He had only played Legend of Heroes for a period of time in the early years, and had also charged quite a lot of money, becoming an RMB player. Online games are the best way to launder money, such as web games. What Chen Luo said was actually Ho Yaozong's own personal experience back then. His method of getting clean was to change his appearance, and then, following the advice of someone he didn't know, he chose web games to launder money. Chen Luo wasn't surprised by this at all. He had seen many dark sides of the world and knew the rules of the underground world. The cultural industry has always been the platform most eagerly sought after by criminals for money laundering. Take auctions as an example. The risks are high and the costs are relatively high, so it belongs to the category of high-end violent money laundering. Film and television are also at the forefront of such activities. However, because the gaming industry has only just emerged, its profit mechanism is the most fashionable platform, and it is much more flexible. The cost of a low-end web game server can be controlled at a few tens of dollars a month, and a low-end server can host hundreds of independent areas. There is indeed an actual consumer base, and it is even cheaper to recharge and check accounts. The money thrown into web games in single sums of tens of thousands of yuan is not all traceable. However, most of the people who actually use this trick to launder money are not really big shots. For example, people at the level of Shui Zhixue don't even need to launder the money they make, and they simply don't bother getting involved in this low-end model. But for Ho Yaozong, this was like opening the door to a new world. In this day and age, no one has ever thought of laundering money in this way. When Chen Luo finished explaining the operation of web games and the method of laundering money, he was suddenly amazed. Chen Xiao, you actually came up with this method. You are simply a genius. I admire you to the utmost. Ho Yaozong was so excited that it looked as if he couldn't wait to get started on this matter. Chen Luo glanced at him and said indifferently, "You take care of this matter yourself. There is one more thing I want you to do. Get a pen and paper." Ho Yaozong did not dare to be negligent, and quickly looked for it in the car, and quickly found a pen and paper and handed it over. Chen Luo quickly wrote a line of text on it and handed it back. Ho Yaozong respectfully took the note, and when he saw the content, he could not help but freeze again. He saw that the note said the words Asiyenha, Asihongfa, and Asalong. Go to the Pengcheng Stock Exchange and buy these 3 stocks. Remember, use your own clean money to buy as many as you can. As long as the price of these stocks rises tenfold, sell them all immediately. Ho Yaozong was dumbfounded. He understood stocks. The meaning of the stock code starting with ST is that the financial situation or other conditions of the listed company have abnormal changes, which is a warning to investors that the stock has investment risks and is a losing stock. Chapter 40, I said half is half. Chen Xiao, these stocks. Ho Yaozong, although he was very impressed by Chen Luo at this time, still had some concerns. It will go up. Chen Luo interrupted Ho Yaozong directly and said decisively. Although Chen Luo did not remember the increase in all stocks in 2008, in 2019, he had inadvertently seen a news article about the 10 stocks with the biggest increases in 2008. Without exception, the top 3 were all prefixed with ST, and each of them skyrocketed more than 10 times, and only at the end of the year did they start to steadily fall back. If there was only one Chen Luo with an SA prefix, he might not remember it, but the top 3 were all prefixed with SA, and this pattern was immediately remembered. Before Chen Luo came, he deliberately found all the stocks beginning with SA and compared them one by one, which awakened his memory at the time and brought back the names of those 3 stocks. Chen Lu had a sixth sense for this reason, but Ho Yaozong's body shook when he heard it. Naturally, he would not associate Chen Lu with a reborn person, but rather think of insider trading, which is common in the stock market. Some people use their position to know insider information in advance, such as that a listed company is about to restructure its assets or that some major products are about to be released. There are countless examples of people using this information to buy stocks in advance. It goes without saying that people who know this kind of information in advance are people with great power. Chen Lu even told him 3 stocks at once, and they were still stocks that had lost money in a row. One can imagine the amount of power behind this. However, what made Ho Yaozong a little suspicious was that if Chen Lu knew this insider information, why didn't he use his own funds to buy these stocks, but instead asked him to do it? Chen Luo seemed to see the doubt in Ho Yaozong's mind. He continued with a calm expression, "I'm being watched right now. If my funds enter the market, someone will immediately follow suit. Our funds are too large, and once we enter the stock market, it will cause turmoil. If things go wrong, it will trigger an investigation by the Securities Regulatory Commission, and the consequences will be endless. Ho Yaozong suddenly understood.
No wonder Chen Luo didn't have any entourage with him, obviously to get rid of the stalkers. As for why Chen Luo had someone keeping an eye on him, it was not at all surprising. Because this has almost become the norm among those powerful families, it is not uncommon for family members to kill each other in order to fight for power and profit. Ho Yaozong once again supplemented his own brain, and rationalized another suspicious point about Chen Luo himself.
I see.
At this time, Ho Yaozong already believed Chen Luo's words without a doubt. In addition, I want half of the profits from your purchase of these stocks. Ho Yaozong did not even think about it when he heard this, and he quickly shook his head and said, Young Master Chen, you think highly of me by telling me such important news, how dare I ask for your money?
All the profits naturally go to you. Chen Luo said calmly, I said half, so it is half.
Ho Yaozong was suddenly startled when Chen Luo's indifferent gaze swept over him, and he hurriedly replied, Yes, I will do whatever you say. Chen Luo's main purpose for this trip was actually the stock matter, in addition to dealing with the matters of the Green Dragon Speeder Gang.
The remaining 1 million in his hands could not make any waves in the stock market.
So from the very beginning, he had no intention of using that money to speculate in the stock market, but rather to use it as daily operating capital, such as renting a room, buying clothes and props, etc. Chen Luo did not want all the profits, but someone like Ho Yaozong would not willingly accept being driven if he was not given sufficient benefits to feed him. While the two men were talking, the car had already stopped outside the Longquan Hotel.
Contact me as soon as the Tyrannosaurus arrives. Yes, Chen Xiao.
After Chen Luo finished speaking, he opened the car door and got out, then walked towards the Longquan Hotel. This was a 5-star hotel, and Chen Luo had booked a room here in advance in order to prevent Ho Yaozong from noticing anything unusual and to prevent exposing his own address. After entering the hotel room, Chen Luo quickly began removing his makeup, and after restoring his original appearance, he changed into casual clothes and leisurely walked towards the school.
This was the time when their class was having evening self-study.
Although Chen Luo still had a lot to do, he never broke his word. Since he had said he would pick up Gu Qinghuan, he put aside all his other matters.
Moreover, on the way there, Chen Luo could constantly improve the plan in his mind and look for possible loopholes.
This was a habit Chen Luo had developed over thousands of years. He liked to plan carefully before acting, analyzing each step and the various possible outcomes as well as the possible reactions of the other party.
Only after he is certain that everything is perfect will he take action.
To others, this may seem like a long time, but over thousands of years, Chen Luo has honed his logical deduction skills to the extreme. While others need days or even months to plan something, he can formulate a detailed plan in just a few minutes or a few hours at the most.